Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's Family and Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee on Thursday, the 3rd of March. So welcome to everyone today. We have what looks like a full house. The first thing I'm going to do on the agenda today is to take any apologies for absence.
I've received apologies from Councillor Anna Thompson and John Sanderson. Thank
you very much. Before we move on to the next part of the agenda, which is the minutes, I'd just like to put on record welcome to a new member today, Councillor Suzanne Fellis-Aitken, who is from Hexham East, if I'm correct. And welcome to the committee. I'm sure you will find it an extremely rewarding task to be on here. We all enjoy it. Everyone's all smiling there, so that's a good sign. So welcome to the committee anyway. Right, if we can now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the minutes from the 3rd of February meeting, and they are contained on pages 1 to 10 of your agenda pack this morning. Can I check if anyone has any points of accuracy on those minutes? I'm not seeing anyone indicating. So on that basis, I will sign them off as a true and accurate record for that meeting on the 3rd of February. So thank you for that. We again have our wonderful noise in the background there from works going on. So if you can just bear with us, anyone watching on the live feed at home, that noise is not from this room, it's from outside. We then move on to item 3, which is disclosure of members' interests. Everyone has signed a declaration of interest form, which is a standing legal document for the council. What I need to know is there anything over and above what you have on your declaration of interest which relate to any items on today's agenda? Councillor Dodd.
I'm not sure if it's a declarable interest, but the landowner on the pink paper item used to be leader of the Conservative group on this council. So I'll withdraw when we get to that item.
Okay, thank you. And similarly on that item, 3 years ago I was lobbied by Northumberland County Council on this matter, but that was 3 years ago when I was deputy leader, and I've not had any involvement since, but I would still like that put on record that I have had a meeting about this around 3 years ago. Okay, so those are noted. We then move on to item 4, the forward plan of key decisions, which Chris Angus is going to take us through. Chris.
Thanks, Chair. There's nothing really on. Well, there's a couple of items in the forward plan for facts, but all are scheduled to come to the committee at various stages. So there isn't. The forward plan's just a note at this point.
Okay. Anyone has any comments on the forward plan? Don't see any. So thank you very much for that. We are going to move on to the substantive agenda now. I'm going to move the agenda around a little bit because I'm going to take the item number 8 first, which is the school transport review. I would just point out to members that this is a briefing note. It's an update for members. It's not for us to make any decisions. I'm happy to take any comments from members present. We do have a member of the public attending today, Lindsay MacLeod, who is here and is here to observe. I know it's a particular passion of yours, Lindsay, and I know we had a discussion before the meeting, and I think you're going to take some notes away and then feedback to us after the meeting, because we will be looking at a more substantive report later on in the year. So, if we can take item 8 first, which is the school transport review briefing note, and I believe that Audrey Kingham is going to take us through that one. So, over to you, Audrey.
Thank you, Chair. Just to bring to everyone's attention, and Chair has mentioned this already, this report is a briefing note rather than a report. It sets out the terms of reference and the purpose of the review being undertaken, led by myself, with some colleagues who are with us here today in the room, around school transport. Important, I think, because this committee particularly asked to overview the governance of the school transport system and processes we have in place, and therefore the purpose of this is to really set out the aspects that we are going to look at, and in particular the time frame in readiness for a much fuller report that will come back to this committee. I think I've just managed to There we go. Okay, so as you will see in the terms of reference in the report in the paper pack, the Family and Children Scrutiny requested a review of governance and oversight within school transport. It's had a number of challenges, as you would expect, throughout the pandemic, and had to work in slightly different ways. And those challenges have been greater than those that would be typically presented throughout usual transport routines. There have been more challenges than just the usual day-to-day routines, particularly around SEN transport, with a significant budget underestimate, and that certainly is a key factor within our review. And as you will have heard from other reports coming through this committee, we know that we have challenges year on year with increasing pupils accessing education healthcare plans. It's on average between 7 and 10% increase across the last 5 to 7 years. This year we are seeing a 19% increase, and that has significant implications upon SEN transport should we not have any systems in place moving forward. So to try and prevent a year-on-year underestimation of budget, we've included that within this review as well. To give you some background and context, the passenger transport team is currently based in planning and local services, and the school transport service is nested within the passenger transport team. One of the things that we will look at as part of this review will be to see whether that location, whether that nesting is the most appropriate arrangement, and would it have a better strategic fit elsewhere within the services across the council. So that will be another aspect, and you'll see that in there. The breadth that this team covers is pretty significant. They work across the mainstream school transport for our SEN children, post-16 transport. We also have the public transported bus services and transport for adult social care and children's social care within the transport team. A number of those, for example, we won't be looking at the public transport supported bus services, but we will consider the commissioning arrangements and check with colleagues in adult social care and children's social care as to whether that is meeting their particular needs and whether, in fact, at any point we need to broaden out the review. You can see by the figures, excuse me, you can see by the figures that this is not an insubstantial budget that we're dealing with here. Several millions of pounds, and therefore it's really important that our routines and processes, whether that's systems and connections, contract award, whether that's commissioning, or indeed whether or not it's our safeguarding processes and budgeting processes are accurate and appropriately governed, then this review will consider all of those aspects. So we will look at the mainstream budget, we look at post-16, and then, as I said earlier, we will also talk with adult social care and children's social care to check that they're supported and may entirely be satisfied with the system in the way that it currently operates. And you know, we'll feed that into the review as well. So a number of phases that we're talking around here, and you'll see that phase one's already completed, or we're beyond the deadline of phase one, albeit only last weekend, last Sunday. But we have done and completed the review of all the policies against regulation and guidance, reviewed all of the constraints that may need a policy direction, and we've reviewed any system and process change within that, both for mainstream and for SEN. So both of those have been completed. That's, I'm going to say, a fairly transactional review aspect, because what we're doing is looking at our current policies, looking at national guidance and ensuring that there are no gaps between the two. The subsequent phases will begin to look at whether or not these are sufficiently and precisely child-centred sufficient. Phase two, we're also looking at current safeguarding processes and checks, and again looking at the routines and examples that are in place, and looking at the appeals process and compliance with regulations there. And again, well underway, a significant amount of work already done there. There is further work to do on that aspect, and to give this committee some assurance, this isn't just looking at paper processes and systems that currently exist. It will also be considering whether or not we can enhance or develop any of the systems that currently exist. But we will also be using the specialist safeguarding team to undertake a number of unannounced visits across the county to current contract holders and testing those on a daily basis to ensure that we've got accuracy in place, and they'll form part of the report at the end of it. So phase 3 will start to look at the current needs of adult social care and children's social care. And part of that is, are they happy with the commissioning services, but actually are there opportunities to consider greater value for money within the processes and current awards and contracts. We will also, in phase 4, look at the review of resources that support the current school transport system. That will include staffing, whether there's a sufficient infrastructure in there, the process and eligibility for transport and the needs, commissioning, contract arrangements and budget setting, planning and forecasting models. Clearly, as I said in the introduction, SEN transport has been a significant challenge budget-wise, and so I really want to have a good look at that and make sure that not just our mainstream but our SEN has a good forecasting system in place that we can try out and test again on a number of occasions to make sure that our budget setting processes are much more robust and give some assurance on that phase. The last element of the review will be, I forgot to click the button on that one, apologies, will be to consider where the service fits best across NCC. We'll look at whether there are opportunities for other links to directorates and services, and that may be that having a clearer link to other aspects may be the answer, the solution, not necessarily changing that more broadly. We'll consider and provide some systems and process recommendations. We'll look at the exploration of transport models and give some options. So we won't be saying this is what we think it should look like. We'll be giving options in terms of that final report. And then the other aspect is to consider whether or not within the whole process we have any single points of failure or operational risk that we should consider. Now, particularly as a scrutiny committee, that would be something that you're very much interested in. So we felt it was really important to have that as part of the review. And then on the last page, you probably not read this very well on the screen, but certainly it's in the terms of reference. The school transport review, just a Gantt chart to show you that phase over time. And we'd aim to bring a report back here June, July, depending on the agenda items at that particular point. And so that would be the summary. We'd aim to have that. So far, it's been on time, on schedule. There are no hiccups. I don't know any of the findings so far and shouldn't know any of the findings so far. I've got a whole range of colleagues who are working with me on this. We have a fortnightly kit meeting with the team in transport so that they are fully engaged and part of the process and engaged within the review so that we're doing it together and it's certainly not being done to the team in transport. So Chair and Committee, an overview there for you, and I'm happy to take any questions should you have them.
So thank you, Audrey, for that. If I can just advise members on page 157, there's a very clear narrative here. So what it's asking is consider whether there are any additional tasks which should be added to the current terms of reference. So, on that basis, what I'd like to do is find out if anyone wants to speak. I've got Councillor Anne Dale. Councillor Dale.
Sorry. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the report, and it is quite depthy, and obviously people who worked along the system for a long time will see how everything integrates. I just think one of the things I would like to ask is, we have the County Council has its own policies, however, it has to act on government legislation in some cases. And what I would think I would like to see is, I mentioned about last week in benchmarking, going back to a base budget for the whole of the county council's budget. Now, what I would like to see is actually, excuse me, the cost of those schemes that we have to progress through statutory government, from government, right? But also the ones which this council has proposed as a separate policies. Because obviously we're going to have a real core, it's a lot of money, and especially SEND is oversubscribed. And that might be something we can't do anything about. But however, we might need to look at other policies where the council can actually change its policies accordingly to keep the budget down. But we need to ensure that it actually doesn't leave any children unable to access transport to school. So would it be possible, Audrey, I don't know if it might be too difficult to do that. I mean, I know you could do it, but it might take a bit of time. But I think it's very important that we actually get to the core position where what we have to provide is a statutory provision laid down by government legislation, and those which actually belong to the council's policy agenda, which, you know, we've all had all kinds of things. I can remember 16 plus transport, but there'll be others as well. But also, integrated into that, which is going to, I know Mark Cussick has a terrible time, certain times of the year when they're bamboozled with all these people about school transport. But the fact that also, on top of that, we do the transport integrated public transport support bus service. Could this be an opportunity where the council actually works together more closely with the schools and providing that service itself, where it could be it could be cheaper? I'm not saying it is, but it could be. So, you know, it's duplicating these things, but also the cost of these bus services, and they all come in from our area come in from concerts all over the place, miles away out to provide the service. So it's just, maybe, I don't know, we look at saying, well, we could provide certain services and we can actually do a bus service where they've been cut back. There's all kinds of things you can look at. But it's just, what I would like to do is see, particularly the statutory bus service we have to require to deliver, and benchmark that out, please.
Audrey, if you can pick that up.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Dale. No, I'm hoping that actually what we intend to do is addressing what you've asked for. So we will be clear to say these are statutory responsibilities of which we have no option. We have absolutely to do these.
Yep.
These are budgets that are a choice for NCC to do, and I'll follow what the priorities are that are provided by the administration. So, but we'll be clear to detail that in the report. And without doubt, one of the huge purposes of this is to say, is there anything we could do differently, and begin to explore how we could do that differently. I'll be clear to say I'm not a school transport expert in any way, shape or form, but in answer to could we get services working more closely together, that for me is a real core purpose. You would expect me to say that the purpose of this is about meeting the needs of our children across Northumberland and ensuring that there isn't a disadvantage there. That is certain, and I need that to be a core within the overall school transport and SEN transport system.
Sorry, can I just add to that? Just so, Audrey, we have, where I live, we're a provision for social services. And there's a county council bus that comes up and down every day, bringing people in, taking them out. And it comes and it goes. What it does in between, I have no idea, but it is a bus, and it'd be quite useful if you can actually make use of that bus or something. But I don't know what, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of bus services about running around. What they actually do in the middle between actually what they're doing at the beginning and the end of the day could be something to be looked at.
We'll definitely pick that up. And
thank you.
Absolutely. So we've got two more speakers that have seen. One is Councillor Ball and then Councillor Swinburne. So Councillor Ball first.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I did ask for this to come to this committee. So I have a few things that I would like to see either included or know where they're going to be included within this. So part of it is the procurement process and the bidding process, and how we make sure the checks and reviews aren't just paper tokenism, that they've got a safeguarding policy that they're going to do the DBS check. How are we going to guarantee that these things are going to happen, and when will the reviews of these things take place during the contract, and any breaks if they don't, and what consequences if they don't step up to these different things. I've had a number of parents in my area mention changes with things like sharing of transport with other children, and because they're now sharing transport with children with different needs from theirs, that they're getting upset, and it's upsetting the start of the day and the end of the day with pressures and things. Just how are we going to review who's sharing transport and the impacts on these young people? Obviously there is cost saving that's been done, but it shouldn't be at the detriment of children in Northumberland. It's good to hear about the spot checks that are going to take place. But within that, what kind of spot checks are going to take place? Will it be insurance, DBS, MOTs, suitability of the vehicle, things like, is it taxed? Because if it's not, then it's not insured. And just the suitability for the children that's in it, because if they don't like confined spaces and they're stuck in a smaller taxi, then obviously that will have an impact. And also, what would the process be following on if there was a failure there? What would happen after that? Would it be a case of you get a wrapped knuckle or 3 warnings and you're out? What would actually be the following on from that? And the other thing is, where do the parents and service users fit within this? Because obviously, ultimately, they're the most important part of this whole process as well. Thank you.
Audrey, if you could pick those up, please.
Yeah, I'm hoping I'll get most, but I might wrap them up in a couple of summaries, if you like. I think everything you've pointed out, I'm hoping Councillor Ball is within this, and to provide some assurance that you've not said anything we haven't considered already so far. Certainly from ensuring that this isn't a cost-saving exercise. That isn't the purpose. This is about ensuring this is appropriate. If anything, we've underestimated the SEN transport business, which causes different budget pressures in other aspects. So getting the accuracy of that right is really important. But for me, I'm back to making sure that we meet the needs of children. More broadly, we must consider that. We actually haven't put an aspect in there around liaising with parents and children at this moment, because this is part of internal process and its checks and balance and governance. That doesn't mean to say it won't come out as a recommendation, to have that as a consideration moving forward, and we'll certainly take note of that. Okay.
Thank you. You happy with that? Good. And then Councillor Swinburne, and then I've got Councillor Dodd.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm pleased this report's here, and I welcome and look forward to the outcome of the review. This committee's seen a number of reviews carried out into the processes and services, which is correct and appropriate, because you can't just make a decision and leave what the outcomes are and carry on for years. Times change, the economy, the environment, numbers change, and if COVID hasn't done anything else, it should have created a wake-up call for people and different areas that they must carry out a review into processes and procedures and policies to keep up with today and to plan for tomorrow. I know myself, and I know you, Chair, are familiar with certain areas, certain policies, procedures which seemed set in their ways and have not been reviewed and need to be reviewed. I'm pleased that this committee, I'd like to say, isn't one of those areas, because we constantly see reviews into processes where we can improve and carry those out, and we've seen that year on year while I know we've been in administration, but that isn't the same for everything else in the council, and I think we really need to press back across the council to say things need to be reviewed, policies and processes everywhere. And if there haven't been so far, then hopefully COVID is forcing that to take place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dodd.
It's about, I'm going to put off going to Philip at Morrison's, but I've got to go. But I'm expecting that the fuel's going to go one way. And as we write this report, are there, not get out terms, but we don't want anybody falling into trouble, because I think fuel prices are just going to go, for the short term at least, through the roof. And have we got sort of some flexibility, because we'll end up with the bill? You know, if you're driving a car every day, it's going to cost you more. And I just wonder what safeguarding we have to withstand any storm that is coming on fuel prices.
Audrey.
I think I probably need the school transport team to answer that question, in all honesty, Councillor Dodd. But I mean, we already have talked about some of the pressures that they're currently facing with not just school transport, wider transport issues. But I will get an answer to that for you and bring that back and make sure that that comes through.
Any other comments, observations? I think if I can just pick up on something Councillor Ball said around procurement, I think that is a really important piece of work which needs to happen. Because I think, as Mark Swinburne had said, COVID and this review is going to give us an opportunity to have a look at some innovation and maybe to look at new players in the system to constantly improve. So I think that would be something I think we'd be keen for us to add into your review, Audrey.
Just a quick response to that, Chair. I think later in the agenda, I have the annual education report, and you should see in that report, committee members, a number of aspects where we are having to, we've already thought very differently. We're already behaving very differently. And that's, I'm going to say that's our bread and butter as an education and skills team. And some of our responsibility is to be able to help other teams to understand the impact that this has had across the council, which might not just be within their usual daily routines. Very open and already considering alternative ways in which this could be done to be better supporting our children and young people in terms of their transport for education.
Okay, so on that point, I think we've noted some of our comments on this report which Audrey's brought to us. As you've seen from the timeline, there's still some work to be done, which will progress. I hope Lindsay, member of the public who's here today, I hope you're assured that, you know, there is going to be a review and that we are driving it forward. And I'm sure that Audrey would be more than happy to link in with you, continue to link in with you to help improve the service, because actually that's what we're about. So thank you very much for that. And Lindsay, you're more than welcome to stay for the next few hours if you wish. Otherwise, you can go off and do something else. Okay, so thank you very much, members, for that. So if we can now move back to the core agenda. The next item is the what is item number 5 on your agenda papers, pages 19 to 114. And that is the final decision on the statutory proposals for Atkinson House. If I can just remind members of this, because it is really important, we are not a decision-making body on this committee. We advise, we suggest, we can put pressure in the statutory way in our role as a facts committee, but we are not a decision-making body. So what we do today will be fed through to Cabinet, who are the ultimate decision-making body on that. So on that basis, Sue Aberston, I think you're going to take this report. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, and I'll start with the purpose of the report. You'll be aware that this is the third time we've been through facts in relation to the changes proposed at Atkinson House. But this report sets out the final analysis of the representations received from interested parties during the 4-week statutory consultation that began on the 13th of January and closed on the 10th of February for proposals in relation to Atkinson House Special School. The proposals were to relocate the school from its current site in Seg Hill to the former Richard Coates site in Ponteland, to change the designation of the school from a single-sex school to co-educational, in effect offering enrolment to girls to join the roll of the school, as well as increasing the pupils' places at the school from 80 to 100, with all of those changes taking effect from the 1st of September 2022. And this report sets out the final decision for Cabinet whether or not to approve the prescribed changes as set out in the statutory proposal that is contained within Appendices 1. To give some background, again, just to remind committee members of the process that we've been through and the reasons why we are proposing these changes. So the first point is around the rationale for the proposals, and they're set out in more details in paragraph 9 of the report, but can be summarised as meeting the growing demand for specialist school places, specifically for secondary pupils with ASD and SEMH, and failure to meet these demands would result in the local authority failing in its statutory duty. As previously highlighted to FACS members, the numbers of children and young people being diagnosed with special educational needs in Northumberland has been increasing year on year for the last 10 years, equating to an average increase for specialist school places by over 7% each year. And as you've already heard, we're expecting that to be significantly higher for the year 22-23. With these numbers, there has also been a significant increase in the number of children and young people who have been identified with a primary special need of autism and/or social, emotional and mental health needs. In order to address this increase of demand, Northumberland did bid and was successful in our application for a free school to open in Northumberland, which was planned to open in September 2022. The school, called the New Gilbert Ward Academy, has now been delayed and will not be complete until September 2023 at the earliest. The delay in opening of the Gilbert Ward Academy and the increasing demand outlined above gives evidence that there is need for additional SEMH places across the county. It is therefore proposed that relocating Atkinson House to the vacant former Richard Coates Primary building in Ponteland will provide the additional capacity that would be available on an ongoing basis, rather than spending additional funding on temporary arrangements to meet a demand in the interim. The additional capacity at the proposed site for Atkinson House would also enable the school to expand its provision by moving from a single-sex provision to co-educational and growing additional places for children and young people. In terms of consultation and the background, again, just to remind everyone, we did hold a 6 weeks informal consultation, and following that, Cabinet approved the publication of a statutory proposal. And the details, as I've already mentioned, are set out in Appendices 1 of the report. The publication of the statutory proposal was open for 4 weeks of formal consultation, and that closed at midnight on the 10th of February. During this time, all interested parties were invited to submit comments in the form of a written representation, including support or objections to the proposal, and they were required by midnight on the 10th of February, in line with the statutory requirements set out. Also, just to remind everyone what the Council Cabinet decision makers are able to do when they meet on Tuesday. So, as laid down in the changes required, Cabinet can reject the proposal in its entirety and nothing will happen from this point forward, or they can approve the proposal with or without modifications. That means they can make some changes at that point to the changes, but they would also need to make sure that we consult the governing body of Atkinson House Special School. And also, again, I think something I reiterated last time in committee around the statutory guidance for decision makers, and as Chair has already pointed out, this is the decision of Cabinet, not of FACS, but really should be reminded that decision makers don't simply take into account the number of people expressing a particular view. Instead, they should give the greatest weight to responses from those stakeholders likely to be most affected by the proposal, especially the parents of children of the affected school. Cabinet should also note that the purpose of the statutory consultation was to seek the views of interested parties on a qualitative basis in relation to the robustness of the proposals educationally, in order that the decision-making process of the Council's Cabinet. Therefore, it is not the intention that these results would be used as a referendum. Oh, sorry, clicked too many. Again, just really to remind people that are not familiar with the site at all, but you can see from the image on the screen, these are the two sites that are co-located. So where you can see, obviously the red mark there, that is the current buildings now of Richard Coates Primary School. And the buildings with the darker roofs, probably a little bit more difficult to see, is the former Richard Coates middle school site where the primary was previously housed. Just to give you an indication of what the site entails and how the schools are actually located. And that will come clear a little bit more when I show you some other images as we actually go through the presentation. So really, the main purpose of this report is to feed back on the responses that we received to consultation. So we did receive 111 representations that were received by the deadline to the statutory proposal. The representations received have been taken into account by officers when forming the recommendations as set out in the report. The main comments and themes submitted by interested parties during the statutory period are set out in paragraphs 15 to 24 of this report with commentary, while the full representations are included at appendices 3 of the report, but due to the size of it, this is a link and not individual responses. Also, in further detail, in Table 1 on paragraph 14 of the report, it sets out the groups who responded to the consultation, together with the number in each group and those that either supported or objected to the proposal. So I'll just run through that in a little bit more detail now. So a summary of the representations, together with the themes arising and commentary for each of the groups, is contained in paragraphs 15 to 24 of the report and can be summarised as follows. All parents of students at Atkinson House, 12 parents responded, and they responded to the consultation, and they were all in support of the proposal, stating the benefits of the relocation in terms of what it would bring for the educational offer, as well as being able to meet the needs of girls in Northumberland. The governing body and head teacher of Atkinson House fully supported the rationale for the proposal and are committed to working with the local authority to provide the best possible environment and outcomes for their students. The staff at Atkinson House also supported the rationale for the proposal in order to accommodate the growing number of children and young people in the county with SEMH, and agree that a larger building for Atkinson House is required to better deliver the curriculum for their students. Equally, the staff support the rationale to offer provision to girls in Northumberland with SEMH, as there is currently no dedicated provision. The staff also want to forge links with the wider community and to support them to understand the work that they do for the children with special educational needs and the positive effect that they have on a daily basis for the children's lives. And a detailed response from the staff is contained in paragraph 18 of the report. A summary of the responses also from parents. We received responses from 22 parents from other schools and settings in Ponteland, and that is set out in paragraph 19 of your report. We did receive one parent support for the proposal, stating that every child deserves an equal chance. However, the remaining parents objected to the proposal, as did the Peel Trust directors, the head teacher of Richard Coates, as well as 3 members of the local governing body of Richard Coates Primary School. So the consultation, really the concerns of those that objected to the proposals are detailed in paragraphs 19 to 21 of the report, but can be summarised as follows. They had safeguarding concerns, and they were concerns for the safeguarding of pupils attending Richard Coates Primary School and Little Tinklers Nursery. And that is the main concern raised by parents of children attending these settings. And this was a key concern raised during the informal consultation as well. So since that time, council officers have met with representatives of Peel Trust during the statutory period to understand their concerns in a more site-specific detail in order to formulate some solutions to address the concerns. As a result of these meetings, it is proposed that both schools have their own dedicated site without any sharing of playing fields, car parking or external hard-standing areas. Fences would be erected that would provide an acoustic barrier at an appropriate height, together with landscaping that would provide a physical separation between the two schools, and these were favoured in the meetings by trust representatives to address their safeguarding concerns. A more detailed summary is provided in paragraph 32 of the report. All the students on the roll of Atkinson House Special School are entitled to home to school transport, and this would continue if the school was to be relocated. Currently, there are 17 taxis transporting the pupils to school, and whilst this will increase, it's highly unlikely that there would be a significant increase in numbers. Dedicated on-site secure drop-off and pick-up arrangements will be in place to avoid the need for any drop-off arrangements being required outside of the school site. And as previously mentioned to FACS, as a result of discussions with the Ponteland Town Council, an alternative route to site for taxis has already been agreed to avoid congestion that already appears to exist at the end of Thornhill Road. Just really to put all of the traffic concerns into context and really some of the history of the site that you've seen. Previously, the site did cater for 780 pupils prior to the reorganisation in 2017 to primary secondary. And during this period, 190 pupils were transported on 6 buses to the middle school that picked up and dropped off in laybys on Thornhill Road, as well as parents driving children to school. Atkinson House and Richard Coates would be catering for 260 less pupils if both schools were full, and that would have been the case when Ponteland First School and Richard Coates Middle School operated from Thornhill. Therefore, the traffic congestion would be less than it was previously. Therefore, it's clear the number of students attending Atkinson House and the way in which they are transported directly onto site in taxis would have far less impact on the existing education setting and the local community should the proposal be approved under the previous organisation of schools. Peel Trust also expressed some concerns around the viability of Richard Coates, and they were concerned that there would be a detrimental impact on Richard Coates Primary should Atkinson House relocated. However, with the appropriate safeguarding measures put in place as agreed in meetings with Peel Trust representatives during the statutory period and as set out in detail in paragraph 32 of the report, it is hoped that this will provide the required reassurance to the parents of Richard Coates, Little Tinklers and Atkinson House that their children are safe and secure in their relevant schools should the proposals be implemented. And from a local authority point of view, we currently have no concerns relating to the viability of Richard Coates, as the school remains popular with parents, especially those out of county, as the first preference applications for places in reception for September 22 remain at the previous levels. The other site issues that were brought up by people, there were a number of people objecting to the proposal, stating that other options hadn't been considered. The empty Richard Coates building was a quick and easy solution and not based on the needs of students. It's true that the availability of the former Richard Coates building has provided an opportunity for Atkinson House Special School to expand the number of students it can educate and extend its designation to include girls. However, the rationale behind the proposal is based on the location of the building being fairly central to the county in relation to the population and with a close proximity to excellent road and transport networks, and also offering the opportunity to serve the west of our county more effectively. So while one of Richard Coates' governors suggested that Kirkley Hall, for example, should also have been considered, and the latter forms part of Northumberland College and is therefore outside of the control of the council. Hexham Middle School was also suggested, but being a Grade 2 listed building, this would limit the level of adaptations that could be carried out, as well as the site being so far west that it would increase travel distances significantly for the vast majority of the pupils attending the school. We also were asked during consultation to provide some examples of where primary schools were co-located with SEMH secondary schools. And Peel's Trust suggested that the lack of examples of co-location of SEMH schools with primary supports the view that such an arrangement equates to a high risk. But we believe this is unfounded. And the example that you can see on the slide on the screen is a school in Staffordshire that is a private primary school co-located with a secondary SEMH school that operate on a very similar site to that I showed you in the that exists currently at Thornhill Road in Ponteland. We have also done some further research to discover 3 existing sites that operate in a similar vein. And we are also, as we continue to say here in Facts Committee, very much challenged around providing additional capacity for our children and young people with special educational needs. So indeed, in light of the numbers of these children and young people presenting with SEMH and ASD are continuing to grow, the Council will look to set this type of integrated approach for specialist provision with mainstream as a principle going forward. And I'm sure you'll see some further proposals from us about that in the future. Really, just to give you some feedback from others that responded to the consultation. So we did receive a response from Newcastle City Council. They responded to the consultation in support of the proposal, and as a joint commissioner of places in what will be the new Gilbert Ward Academy, understand the need for additional specialist provision to meet the needs of pupils with SEMH and ASD. And they're also seeing significant increases in Newcastle as well. A summary of the response from the Newcastle Church of England Diocesan Education Board is contained in paragraph 2022, but in summary they were unable to support the proposal as it stands, as they do not yet understand how safeguarding concerns highlighted previously would be mitigated. Ponteland Town Council also submitted comments only and did not specifically state whether they were for or against the proposal, so they have not been counted in the total number either for or against, and a full response that they provided is contained in paragraph 23. We also received a further 23 responses from residents and other respondents. The majority of representation from residents and people who did not specify their interest group shared similar concerns around the proposals as parents of children attending Richard Coates and Little Tinklers, namely safeguarding, traffic and understanding the need for SEMH, but not in Ponteland. And that detail is set out in paragraph 19 of your report. Some respondents within the group also expressed concerns for the well-being of vulnerable adults in the residential area close to the school, and as set out in paragraph 32 of the report, summarises how safeguarding issues are proposed to be addressed at the former Richard Coates site, should the proposal be approved, in order to address these concerns. For information as well, just to really point out that there have been no police incidents in the community in Seghill involving children of Atkinson House Special School within the last 3 years, and that's under the current leadership of the head teacher of the school and the governing body, who are represented here today and are here to take any questions or support any information that you require. Building implications, I think the majority of our discussions have been around safeguarding. So again on the screen there you can see the extent of the proposals, the separation between the two sites, the separate play areas that we are proposing. And again, they are set out in more detail again in paragraph 32, but everything that you see is in line with the DfE Building Bulletin Guidance for Specialist SEMH schools. So during the consultation period, a significant amount of work has been undertaken to determine the scope of works required to meet the curriculum needs of the pupils at Atkinson House, as well as addressing the safeguarding concerns of Peel Trust. These detailed works have resulted in a recommendation to allocate £5.5 million to the project that would be funded from existing resources as detailed in paragraph 33 of the report. And you will remember from the previous report that we talked about the buildings that are in the process of being transferred back to the local authority following Richard Coates CV Primary School's move into the adjacent buildings previously occupied by Ponteland Primary School. Because that process involves the DFE and legal agreements, that does take some time. So the report is also proposing that in the meantime that the local authority enters into a licence agreement with for the ex-Richard Coates buildings in order that construction work can start prior to the formal land swap taking place that is targeted to be complete for the end of the spring term. Other implications are also set out on in paragraphs 26 for education standards. Implications for students are set out in paragraph 30 and really talk about the transition and the work that the staff at Atkinson House will undertake for the students. Implications for staff are also set out in paragraph 31, and again there are no negative impacts on staffing arrangements as part of these proposals due to the increase in role at the school. Transport implications, again, are set out in paragraph 29. Sorry. And it should be noted that some initial estimates have been calculated for the increase to cope with the additional pupils, as well as the transport time, travelling times, and that'll be £122,000 have been identified. And these additional costs will be met through the increased home to school transport budget that was agreed at full council on the 23rd of February. So again, this additional cost can be met within existing resources. Sports and recreation implications are set out in paragraph 35, and as you'll have seen from the previous image, that has an impact on the Mugger facilities. So 2 of the Mugger existing pitches would be allocated to Atkinson House, and 2 new Mugger pitches would be constructed for Richard Coates Primary School, and these would be funded by the council and included in the total that you've seen for the budget overall. And really just to point out that there are no implications for playing fields, as the playing fields will remain in the ownership of the Peel Trust. So really just to draw all of this to conclusion, and thank you for listening. I know it goes on a little bit, but it is a statutory consultation and you really need to be aware of all the implications of the proposals that we have put in front of you today. So really the group most impacted by the proposals are the students at Atkinson House Special School and their parents, as well as the staff of the school, the governing body and the head teacher. And they would have to prepare very carefully for this relocation. However, in light of their representation, it appears that they are prepared to accept the work involved in the relocation in order that the cohort of children and future cohorts, including girls, can benefit from this proposal. The concerns of Peel Trust directors, the head teacher of Richard Coates Primary and the governors of the school and parents of pupils at the school and Little Tinklers Nursery who responded also need to be considered. They have raised a number of safeguarding concerns at both the informal consultation and statutory consultation phases, and similar safeguarding concerns have been raised by residents and group of respondents who did not identify themselves in a particular group. However, as set out in paragraph 13, in light of these concerns, officers did organise meetings. We have addressed the concerns and feel that we have a proposal that that can address those. And again, as you know, the detail is set out in paragraph 32. Therefore, we also had concerns around the increased traffic and pollution, and these were highlighted by many respondents, again linked to the school and nursery on Thornhill Road, and residents in response to the consultation. Paragraph 19 again sets out the level of traffic experienced by the school and residents on Thornhill prior to reorganisation, and this was much greater than that would be experienced as part of this proposal. As noted in paragraph 6, and as I've already said, that this consultation isn't a referendum, and Cabinet should consider the qualitative information that we've provided within the report. Therefore, in light of the education rationale for the proposal, and whilst being cognisant of the feedback and concerns of stakeholders received during the informal and statutory period, Cabinet are being recommended to approve this proposal for implementation from the 1st of September 2022. Thank you.
So thank you for that, Sue. Very comprehensive. And while you draw breath, I'd just like to introduce, we have 2 guests today, Paul Sampson and David Harrison from Atkinson House. And I believe that you're happy to take questions if need be or contribute. So welcome to the committee this morning. So what I'm going to do now is, you've seen the report in front of you and you know what we're doing. This is pre-scrutiny. So what we say, if there are any changes, any additions, or if we're perfectly happy, that is summarised and presented to Cabinet next week. So on that basis, I'm going to open the floor to questions. So we don't have anyone. So I think Councillor Dunbar was first, and then I'll come through. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to get emotional this time. I'm really going to try very hard, so I won't be quoting anything from the consultation. What I'm just going to say is I think it's a very, very, very good, comprehensive report. Everything's covered, and I'm really pleased that all the concerns have been addressed regarding the safeguarding issues and the traffic. This is a school that's very much needed, and definitely for the young girls. Now, I know that I've got a question that it's going to be up to from 80 to 100 pupils, and can I just ask, can the limit be increased if needed, if it's necessary?
I'll answer that and then probably let Paul come in as well. Yes, there is enough capacity within the site and the buildings to increase that capacity. And we're also looking not only to increase the places for the children, but also to co-locate some of our specialist services within the County Council, as well as some from the NHS and CCG, so that actually some of the therapies around the children will also be co-located on the site, and that will form part of the next phase of the work. But I'll let Paul probably come in terms of his management of how we will take more than 100 children.
Thank you. I think if I can just touch on one or two points that Sue made. Having the consultation and being part of that consultation, meeting Ponteland councillors and meeting various groups, I think one thing that needs to be addressed by the school is the question, what is SAMH? And the other question would be, we seem to be called Atkinson House, and then we're called Atkinson House School, and then we're called Atkinson House Special School. And I think there's a real issue here in the sense of, what are the perceptions of the community? What are the perceptions of everybody? The perception was very clear when we first went out to meet people that every student at Atkinson House has a police record. Every person who comes to Atkinson House has to be sent by a judge. Every child at Atkinson House has an educational healthcare plan. The majority of students have had no police involvement at all. So I think it's quite important that we understand what is social-emotional mental health. Social-emotional mental health is where students have real issues around their own identity, attachment, and where they fit in a sense of belonging. The question you've just asked, Councillor Dunbar, would be, one question I'll go back to the council would be, many of these students have been in a large school and suffer in large classes. They need a safe environment, an environment that is loving and small enough so they don't build their anxiety. So the question would be, we would have to review the nature and the type of students who are coming to make sure that we're not disadvantaging the students who are already on site. We wouldn't want to reciprocate a school building that they already have failed in. But I think it's really important that we have an understanding of what SAMH is and how we manage those young people. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I have two speakers that I can see, three now. So I've got Mr Hodgson, then I've got Councillor Ball, and then Paul Rickard, I think in that order. So I'm coming to Mr Hodgson first. And Councillor Dodd, as if I could forget you.
Sue, was just to say that I spoke with the Roman Catholic Diocese yesterday, obviously as the representative, and they are in support of the proposal for Atkinson House, and they said they did submit feedback. Apparently.
Apologies. Yeah, we'll look in and see
Yeah,
see
but
what's
they
happened
are,
to that.
just for the record.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
They're supportive
yeah,
of the
apologies, and
proposals.
I'll rectify that when I present the report to Cabinet.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ball, Then
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple of, will there be a name change with the new site? And will it be called a school rather than a house? And I just want, if this is something that jumps out of the report at me and it actually hasn't got anything to do with Atkinson House or the proposed school, but can we have a report on what on earth is going on with Gilbert Ward Academy? Because it keeps on, the date keeps on moving and moving into the longer grass. And I just, do we need to have a look on what impact it's going to have, not just this year, but next year on the needs? And also, if we're seeing an increase in numbers and need year on year, would it not be wise of us to look at the capacity of that school now before it even opens and just get, like, preempt any additional needs that we might have further down the line? Thank you.
Audrey, you want to take that one?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ball. A couple of things, and I think you'll recall, perhaps at the last facts, we had a long discussion about identity, perception, and ensuring that moving forward, we have a name for the new facility. I'm going to neutralise it and call it that, because we don't yet know whether it's going to be, you know, school or set or whatever. That will need to be co-produced in some way, shape or form. And we'll certainly work with Paul and David and the board at current Atkinson House to be able to develop that. It's really important that those children get every opportunity, as has already been said and in our previous meet, to ensure that their start in a new facility is really good and continues to be good. I had the fortune of walking around the site yesterday, and from a capacity question, yes, there is capacity to increase that, but actually we'd want to make sure that the site is working and working really well for the children in there. There is a huge amount of space in that facility, but it is really important that we have the co-location of services. And this is something that we'll start to see more broadly. Harking back to my previous report about transport and doing things differently, that co-location of services for us is really key for education moving forward. And then, yes, certainly around Gilbert Ward, yes, we'll come back around that one as well, and just give you an update. I think in terms of whether or not we've got the capacity to increase Gilbert Ward, I'm sure I'm not looking at Sue while I say this, so she'll tell me afterwards whether I'm saying it right or wrong. But I think we're fixed in terms of that size and footprint and that original agreement from a free school perspective. She's not, she's shaking her head, so it's right, that's right. She's nodding her head, rather. However, to provide some assurance, I think what we'll also do when we come back to report around Gilbert Ward, we'll talk about what we're doing more broadly around the county. You'll remember that one of our key priorities is meeting children's needs much closer to home. So we're having discussions with all of our localities and partnerships to see how we can develop, change, alter, improve the provision in each of those localities. We have also 3 build developments in the county across the next 3 to 4 years. And that is key within all of those considerations and discussions. We are very much aware of the rising need and some of the systems and processes. I'll talk a little bit in my report around that. But getting ahead of that and being able to predict more accurately, particularly for SEN, is key to this.
Thank you. Sue, you wanted to come in as well?
Yeah, sorry, just to provide a bit of reassurance about Gilbert Ward Academy. The planning application went in about 4 weeks ago now. So that is a massive milestone to actually getting the school delivered for September 2023. So I wouldn't want you to think that it can continue to, you know, to slip. You know, there might be some movement in it, but they are on track, shall I say, to deliver for September 23. And just to clarify, it isn't a project being delivered by the local authority. It is one being delivered by the DFE. So just want to make it clear it's not my team. Thank you.
I hope that provides some clarity there for you, Councillor Ball. So I have 2 more speakers indicating. So we've got Paul Rickard from Church of England, and then we've got Councillor Dodd, and then Councillor Dale. So Paul, over to you.
I think just from our perspective, we welcome the report from officers, and we're aware of the fact those conversations have taken place, and we think they've been very fruitful. Our issue was the fact that we were told we could get a drip feed, but we now understand the legal reasons why we couldn't get the drip feed, of what was going on in the background, and hopefully this will provide some more reassurance, particularly to the trust, to the school, neighbouring and to the community. I guess a couple of further questions, and Paul, you mentioned it yourself there about growth. £5.5 million is a good budget for a school in terms of additional work. But I guess the question is, if we're talking about long term, and we are definitively talking about that site, and you want to get this right for the future, is this then right to remodel, or should this be a brand new building? And I get the constraints of putting a new building, I get the time issues, but I guess from our perspective, and from what you've just said there, Paul, about getting the size right and not creating a massive monster again, but working through, and I'll absolutely welcome co-location of other services. I think that's key to what you want to achieve. And I think moving forwards, that's a great position for the local authorities to be in. I guess I just reassurance that it's a significant investment, and I absolutely think it's the right investment for children who desperately need this, and no one's ever said we don't need the resource. Is a remodel the right thing to do? Or if we're going to set something up for the long term, do we have within the shell of that building a building that can work really for those children who need this resource, a building that can work for those people who should co-locate on that site? Or is there a need to be slightly more ambitious and say, we're going to have to hold for another 12, 18 months, but do we do this again? Do we do it with the right building on that site that then really gives those children, those young people, the best possible start and chance?
Sue, are you taking that?
Yeah, can do. Yeah, so you're right, Paul, but what Richard Coates' old building does do is give that additional capacity. If we were building a school to a DFE formula, it would obviously not give Atkinson House the level of opportunity that they have in a refurbished building. You'll be aware many schools across the country that end up being part of their priority schools building programme with the DFE very often choose to have refurbishment rather than new builds because of the size of facilities that they get. So I think you're right, it's a very robust budget that should deliver everything that we want to deliver from Richard Coates. It is a building that's been well looked after. You know, the structure is sound, and therefore why would we knock something down that is sound and replace it with something new? Thank you, Paul. But you will see that, you know, as Audrey has said, we will be bringing a report around our capacity growth for SEN, you know, linked to our major 3 sort of projects as well. So you will see new facilities coming along as part of those proposals as well. So we are looking at the broader picture.
And I guess, Chair, if I may just come back in terms of, from Paul's perspective, without kind of speaking for the provision, I assume that any enlargement would be in full consultation with that school governing body on that head to make sure that you don't feel you're in a position where you actually become overwhelmed. Because I think that is the broader issue here, isn't it? The fact there are so many children who need this absolute specialist provision. What we don't want to do is then run before we walk and become overwhelmed. Because if this goes through, which it's looking like it's going to go through, it's a plea of it needs to be right first time, not second time or third time, because that just damages things even further, and particularly the children that we're all most interested in.
Okay, thank you for that.
Why nothing, Paul? Wanted
So, Paul, please. Yeah.
Paul, thank you very much for making sure it's going to come back to us as well. Thank you. I just want to add something there, Chair, where this week I went down to Leeds to have a look at a new build or 2 new builds for SMH schools, just to try and have ideas and develop what we're trying to achieve. I think Sue's right to say that if you go through a DFE new build, your footprint, the size of the school would be significantly less, probably half of what we'll be getting if we went to a refurb. Although the schools where I went to see were well built, they were very clinical. They looked very hospital kind of. Whereas you can see the development and the structure of the Richard Coates building, you could see how that's going to meet the needs straight away. The students of an SMH school do find transition difficult, do find change difficult, and I think they need to be very much part of the movement and change and the design of what we're trying to achieve. I think one of the questions, Chair, was about safeguarding. Which was quite key, and we have welcomed the partnership work with the First School and with the Peel Trust. First of all, it's a statutory requirement of the head teacher and the governing body to make sure that every school is safe. So there is a safeguarding responsibility from us. we understand the challenges and perceptions that we have. We have a handful of students who have a risk assessment around them. That is a handful. The majority of our students come from a spectrum of ASD to ADHD. Majority of those students are more leaning towards ASD. Some of those wear ear mufflers. Some of them don't like sounds and noise. And what we've tried to do for a proposal is to look to zone the school into different sections, so we can support the students' needs on those individual bases. And it is the Governor's vision to have co-located with services that will meet the needs of individual children, speech therapists, educational psychologists, behaviour support team. I think this is the way forward in terms of supporting the young people. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Paul. So I now come on to Richard Dodd, Councillor Dodd, and then Councillor Dale.
Yeah, I need to not declare, but say I am a member of the Pontyland Town Council. But there was Councillor Lyle Darwin and myself as county councillors took no part in whatever they have said. Right, this one, you know, like all changes that come along, there's always going to be issues. The traffic was an issue at this school when there was an awful lot more pupils. There is work coming to Thornhill Road, North Road, that might be a help, and I agree that taxis coming in from the top end might be a very good move, because at the bottom end it is gridlocked at certain times of the day. However, the same taxis will probably have to go through that traffic at some point. And like all these things, we might have to revisit the cars that are parked on Thornhill Road at some point. I did a scheme opposite the schools with, it was ISOS, the housing provider at one time. We put a lot of car parking in there to get what I'd call the pensioners' cars off the pavement. I'm not thinking that they're going to get a lot of what I call parents sitting waiting to pick up kids at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because that's what was happening, because a lot of the roll that comes into Pontyland comes from Newcastle, and in some cases it's over 50%. And some of the responses are all from Newcastle. Some of them aren't, some are genuine and local. So the traffic will be watched by myself. As for Pontyland shopping bit that people are concerned about, I mean, we get issues there now. There was 4 kids pulled all the flowers and plants out. And thankfully we do have a very good CCTV system, and they were all identified via the schools. And I think 3 were from outside the area of the 4. So change is always going to be a concern, and equally there's a concern that, oh, we want security, but security doesn't have to look like Stalag Luft or whatever. You know, we need what I'd call sympathetic security that doesn't make it look as if it's something alien and what I'd call just plonked there, because it's already, and I take the point, you know, a modern school, brand new school is clinically like a hospital or whatever, and it's got no character. Whereas this court school does have character, and if these kids are coming here, it will have a school feel, because presumably the whole point of this is to get them back into mainstream education. And I think that the co-location is a big issue that is coming down everywhere. And I think there's a person representing Pontyland. I have to take all these concerns seriously, but equally we've had a huge investment in Pontyland. We've got a new Darras Hall school. The school next to this is not that old, and we've got the new leisure and campus that was heading north of £50 million, and that's really just still bedding in, because that was opened in COVID times. So we haven't seen the full potential of what Pontyland is going to achieve. And I must refer to when we took control of the county council, there was an awful lot of children going out of the county. And we made the decision that we want the investment in this county, and 5 point whatever million and a whole load of specialist jobs within this county is welcome. As I say, I will have to face a lot of the people who are objecting, and I have done. But I think with all objections, there is a little bit of a mistruth in whatever is being put about. So, and I know my colleague, Councillor Jones, is a great advocate of these schools. So I think, I wouldn't say as a local member, welcome. I need to keep a watching brief on everything that's going on. Thank you, Chair.
So I'll just pick up on something Richard said there about CCTV. It will be sympathetic if there is any CCTV going there.
Yeah. So there will be some CCTV. We put it on every school, and one of the schools that that Councillor Dodd mentioned there, Darrasol, that's got CCTV as well. It's one of the standard things that we do. Some internally and some externally as well. And Ponteland High School also got CCTV, so it's no different. In terms of I suppose border treatments and fences and things, we've deliberately, as part of the designs that you've seen, is actually stepping the fences inside the actual school more, so all the hedges, all the trees can remain, but are still safeguarded from children being able to climb over them, up them, etc. So actually the residents hopefully will not see very much difference. You will see some fences poking above the hedges, obviously, but there'll be things that you can see directly through. So there's probably something that you can see over on Morpeth First School over there, of the appropriate height as well. So, but all of that detail we'll be able to share if Cabinet approve the proposal on Tuesday.
Thank you for that, Sue. I've got Councillor Dale and then I've got Councillor Swinburne.
Thank you very much. First of all, can I just say thank you to Paul Rickard for raising that issue. I actually raised that at the last meeting, when it was the first one before, about whether actually there was an opportunity to build a bigger school. And it's quite good to hear from Mr Harrison about your looking at other schools and what the DFE compost is for design, and that would be smaller. Can I just say that we deserve every child the opportunity to have a good education. And as Councillor Dodd said, there's been lots and lots of massive investment in Ponteland, and this is just future investment. All our children all have different needs to get a good education, and there's no difference between the investment we're putting in the Ponteland High or anything else and what we're investing here. It's just giving a different environment for children who have different needs, and to be able to manage their needs and to get them to learn and to fulfil their future. So the point that people are saying they're different, they're not different. We've all got different needs and have always had different needs to be able to taught and learning. And therefore, I actually think, thank you. You've taken all the initiatives to ensure that their environment is good for them. And I just wish them all very well. I think probably I would love to have seen millions in a brand new building, and much bigger than what the DFE says, but it's actually not going to happen. But I'd like to say thank you very much, and I actually think this report and all the work being done fulfills the requirement to giving more people access to a better education, as we have with the other schools, and better environment for them too. So thank you for all that work. It's been quite depthy in everything that's gone on. It's been a long time. So thank you for all that. And I just wish all the children very well when they get in there, and look forward maybe to even visiting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dale. Councillor Swinburne.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'm really shocked to hear Councillor Dodd mention about plants being stolen in Ponteland, because some would have you think that only happened in Cramlington. One first question I just want to ask. It mentions in here on page 32 about a 3-metre high fence being put between the two establishments. And I wanted to query that as to, and it might sound petty, it might sound a minor detail, but what type of fence that's going to be, because I just have this mental image of a Belfast-style peace wall being stuck between two schools, which would be highly inappropriate. And I've just got a horror about that. But Councillor Dale has covered a great deal, although she's run off, of what I was going to say. This has been here 3 times now. It would have been very easy for the council just to say, this is what we're going to do, and go ahead and do it. But they've gone through a very prescribed process, a lot of consultation, and gone back and addressed all of the points, as far as I can see, that have been raised, and addressed those concerns, put in place solutions. Now, I have a special needs school on my ward. I've got Hillcrest on my ward. And I want to come back to the things that Paul's been saying from Atkinson House. And I want to thank you for giving those explanations as to SEMH, because there's a lot of myth and misunderstanding about children that have these needs. And you're quite right in what you've explained, is that these are not all, or by any means, many who were, involved with the police, and this myth of horrendous children. These children, and I feel like I regularly bring this point up when we have these type of reports, bringing it down to the personal touch. These are children who have challenging starts and difficult circumstances, children and families, and I'm pleased you explained about it, because this is why there is a need for this. They may, as you've said, not be able to fit into a mainstream education and a mainstream school. The problem, and this might not be the right language, and I really apologise for this, the problem is not with them, it is with the norm, as it were, and it's because that norm is just not appropriate to them. And so we need to provide something which allows them to have, as Councillor Dale said, the right start in life and the right education. And this is what this does. There's just not enough at the moment, and this is what we're trying to do. So it's not a problem with that individual. The problem is with what everybody accepts as mainstream and normal. It's just we need to provide a different solution. What does disappoint me is that the amount of people, and it's reflected in this report, who agree that we need to provide that different option, just not in my backyard. And that really disappoints and angers me, that they all say, yes, that's fine, yes, we've got to do it, just not near me. Because it's that lack of understanding that we need to get to know, exactly as you've explained, Paul, that they are not what people perceive these children to be. And I think sometimes the public need to get to know a bit more about it before they just write them off and make an assumption. And I really support and back all of the information that's in this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swinburne. Actually, Councillor Swinburne, if you could switch Councillor Dale's mic off, even though she's not there, because that'd be great. Paul, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think it's really important to be aware that the governors at Atkinson House made a request to the council in 2019 to bring girls, to have a discussion around about bringing girls on roll. That was 3 years ago. I've been in post 3 years, and we very much welcome the idea that all people are supported, all children are going to be supported. I think it brings greater depth and education to the young lads at school too. We at Atkinson House are doing quite a bit of support with the People Referral Unit, and they have a co-ed system. So there's no real issues, no more than mainstream, of co-education, and we think that's really, really important. To pick up on your point, Councillor, we want to work on 3 areas within Atkinson House. We want to develop learning capital. So A student left Atkinson House last year with 5 GCSEs, 4 at level 5 and 1 at level 4, English, maths and science. Our students don't particularly have a learning need, they have a learning gap. And it's important that we understand what those gaps are and how do we close those gaps and make sure that all young men and young women have an opportunity to succeed in life. The other areas, though, within a SEMH school is we have to look at the community capital, understanding how we're developing the SEMH. And we also need to work on the social capital, how they have to develop their independence. As all schools in the county, we have to do an assessment on each child and understand where the strengths lie and where the gaps lie, and we have to plug those gaps. And some of the conversations that you've had there, Councillor, is true. This building will enable us to have a much bigger, better environment to meet the needs of all young people in Northumberland, but also to work in partnership with the new free school in Blythe. We want to be that partnership, and we want to be able to knit closely together so we're not in isolation, and we complement the work and support the people from the southeast as well as all Northumberland. So that's really important to us, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Does it outright, Councillor Dunn?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, safeguarding was a big concern in this, and I'm really pleased to see that the concerns of the community and other people that put these representations in were sort of addressed with vigour during the consultation. And I'm reassured from hearing what the head teacher of Atkinson House and representing his governing body are saying, that I think these will continue to be sort of reassessed going forward proactively in the community. I think schools, whatever type they are, need to really be at the heart of the community, so that link needs to remain there, and I am reassured from what I've heard today that it will be going forward. I know my own ward a couple of years ago had students working within it, and it went really well, you know, and really I've got to say that people didn't know where those students were coming from at the time. The knowledge just wasn't there. So I think the community links going forward, you know, I think it will be reinforced and the safeguarding continuously sort of assessed going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm not seeing any other hands wishing to... Oh, sorry, it's David Harrison, isn't it, David?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think just to put it into context from a governing body point of view, thank you all for your positive comments. It's long been an aspiration of the governing body to go co-educational. I know Sue would back me on this. We've had a number of conversations going back over the years to try and affect that change, but the capacity issues at Atkinson House just wouldn't allow us to do that. So this is a really positive step for us, and I think, you know, our role as governors is to support Paul and the leadership team to deliver the vision for these young people who, you know, are quite often, you know, stigmatised, the deserving of the very, very best we can offer them. And I think under Paul's leadership in the last 3 years, you know, we're moving very much to this very, very positive outcomes. You know, he's mentioned about, you know, the people who got 5 GCSEs. That never happened in the past. And I think there's this vision about, you know, creating this learning experience for these young people who, yes, they've all got AHCPs sitting behind that, but it's our job to deliver and give them the very, very best opportunities in life moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. So, because this is a statutory process that we're going through, I just need to be very clear that people understand what we are about to make a decision on to then feed into Cabinet. So pages 19 to 20 of your report actually indicate to you 6 core recommendations, and that we obviously note the fact that a consultation is taking place, that we note the responses, that we note the options, but that we note the increase of £122,000 to meet the home transport costs, the allocation of the 5.5 million, and approve the implementation of the proposed building solution set out within the report. In effect, what I think we have done this morning is captured some of the comments which I've taken as we want assurances and we have sought assurance that the site is value for money and is appropriate. I think Councillor Dodd has raised an issue about engagement with highways, which I think we can capture, which Chris will have captured this morning, and that there will be constant dialogue as far as place planning is concerned, which will be something that we do as a local authority anyway. So based on those, and obviously what Chris will be writing up to present to Cabinet next week, because this is a statutory process, and I think it's very important that we actually do this properly, what I'm asking for is those people eligible to vote this morning on the committee. I would like to take a show of hands, all of those in support of the recommendation to drive to Cabinet that we support this report. So on that basis, can I please have a show of hands, all those in favour? And anyone against? And any abstentions? So for the record, that was unanimous of those members this morning who were eligible to vote. So our discussion, summary of, will be presented to Cabinet next week on Tuesday, where they will make the final decision. So thank you very much. I know that was quite a detailed report, and thank you, Sue, for that, but it's very important that we actually do things correctly. So thank you very much for that this morning. We're now moving on to, and David and Paul, you're more than welcome to stay for the rest of our deliberations, but if you need to go, you are excused from class. There you go. So we're now moving on to item number 6 on your agenda paper, which is the annual report for education and skills service, which are contained pages 115 to 142 on your report. Over to you, Audrey Kingham.
Thank you, Chair. Just wait for the presentation to be loaded.
Is that your dog?
No.
No, okay.
It'll be Leslie's. Dog. No, Wayne does know my dogs, but no, they don't look like that. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that. This morning I'm presenting to the Children's Overview and Scrutiny the annual Education and Skills Report for the academic year 2020 to 2021. So halfway through the new academic year, but this is the looking backwards and having a good overview of the performance last year. So this review is provided to committee members to inform and review the education performance across Northumberland in 2021. It presents the work of the education and skills team and reviews the impact of the work to support the continued education challenges throughout the ongoing COVID-19 global pandemic. And indeed, it also informs and reviews the digital annual report, which you have a copy of in the report pack today for you as well. There are 3 recommendations that the committee is recommended to review the performance overall in the headline report, receive the digital annual report and recognise the performance given the continued challenges of the global pandemic and the valuable support provided to all pupils and learners within all settings and services listed in the report, and to review the key areas for improvement in the education and skills priorities that inform how we revisit and shape future improvements and work programme. So I wanted, forgot to press the button there. I wanted to start off by just closing the loop on the previous reports. This time last year, I sat here and went through the report, and I gave you some improvements, said things that we needed to improve on and we needed to really focus on. Of those 3 areas and aspects that were picked out last year, I wanted to just note that all 3 of those have been undertaken. At the conclusion of the 1920 annual report, we identified continuous improvement and accelerated development across our aspects. The priorities now inform the work of the established Education Strategy Board and the strategic and operational direction of the Directorate. That work's complete and the work approach aligned, and I'm sure that this committee will have heard us all talk about inclusive education services, inclusion within the portfolio across the whole of education and skills from our early years settings right through to post-18 and in-work development. We talk very much about meeting needs much closer to home, and that is just narrative that naturally occurs. We talk about the progression and destination of our pupils and our young people across Northumberland and strengthening those. And so they are aspects that have just really become embedded within our day-to-day routines. We also said we'd develop a skills strategy for Northumberland. It was a key action to support schools, skills development and access to skills and businesses, and in particular to align with the economic priorities of the county, and that's completed. This committee will remember that you received that skills strategy, and we had a number of in-depth discussions, and actually we've got some further work to bring back to this committee as a result of those discussions, but that again is complete. And then the last aspect was the development of a coherent approach to working with businesses and begin the work to support schools, skills and all of our residents. And in particular, you've received that report around the research that informs where we go, what we do. There are a number of aspects, not least our discussion around careers at the last report meeting, the work with corporate parenting and identifying businesses to be our blueprint moving forward, and Graham Wrighter, my colleague and Director of Children's Social Care, leads on that work, and we're working alongside. Excuse me. But also the digital platform developed alongside Global Bridge, supporting more and more of our children within secondary schools to be able to access greater and wider opportunities moving forward for progression and into employment. So really important, I think, for me to close off those aspects from last year and to assure the committee that we don't just write those down as bullet points, that we do continue those in our aspects of work throughout the year and make sure that we follow through on our promises, both to you, but more importantly for the children in schools across Northumberland. So the report's fairly detailed. I'm going to give you some high-level information because there's a lot of information detailed in there, and you'll have had time to read that and no doubt have some questions for me on it. Key issues that I highlighted was we've got the digital education report. We really like this. We're able to use it and chop it up and use it across the year, and actually for a whole raft of reasons, it's a really accessible way to show visually the performance across the year. We're able to continue to use that, not just in presentations, but in some of the national forum that we work in. The teams use those statistics and indeed our discussion engagement, not least with Ofsted and wider statutory bodies. They're often interested in what we're able to provide at a snapshot without having to read through a report. So very, very useful tool. Two or three other things to point out to you. The performance is not comparable against previous years, and I know, you know, I'm the first person who loves a set of data that I'm able to compare against the previous year and to look at a 3 or 4 year trend. And as I stated last year, you know, we had different grades. We had teacher assessed grades last year, calculated grades the year before. So that's not something we're able to compare with, nor are they published. What we have tried to do in the report is provide you where it's available with a national performance, but it's not necessarily available for everything. So I have provided that for you where we can. I would also say that the report should demonstrate that we've continued our excellence and partnership. That isn't just about NCC, that's everybody in the education system, I have to say. And that's in the widest context, so really bringing in all the services support to ensure that there's a rapid response and thinking a bit differently to meet the needs of our schools and early year settings, post-16, and the needs of our university students in the county as well. We've developed an innovative approach connecting industry and education through a digital platform. It's raised the profile of Northumberland nationally, with the first local authority to commit into that, and therefore we have the fortune to be asked on many occasions to be part of conversations or present data. And that's brilliant because it gives our pupils across the whole of Northumberland an edge and an advantage that other authorities don't have currently. So very pleased with that. We want to do further work and development to maintain that pace of change and really continue that evolving digital world, and make sure that we're able to respond and maintain that pace of being ahead of everyone else. Keep our pupils and young people at the forefront. Our inclusive ed services, accelerating the service response to meet the continual emerging needs. I do feel they're a bit of a chameleon because they do have to change fairly frequently to be able to respond and be receptive to the needs of children. We will see for years to come the impact of what we are still living through at this moment. And whilst nationally and statutorily there are changes to how we will behave within a COVID environment, we in education will continue to see that for some while. We're not yet able to quantify that or understand what it is that we specifically need to do. But collectively, there is still a lot of work to just get that baseline set, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. In May of 2021, you will recall that the SEND re-inspection for the our written statement of action was undertaken, and we were one of 8 authorities who were inspected last year, but only 2 of the 8 had their written statement of actions removed. 6 of those authorities remained within the written statement of action, so a really good position to be. The skills team, you've already had the adult skills report at the last meeting. They continue to develop their provision and to become partners and really identify the gaps that we have in provision across the county. And it is really important to meet the needs not just of residents but also of our businesses, and particularly important post-COVID recovery. And actually the one team that you do hear an awful lot from is from our school organisation and resources teams, Sue, in effect, with a lot of the developments, the builds, the statutory functions, but also, I want to say, as a result of being able to respond very quickly with our winter grants, be able to support our young people with uniforms, with food vouchers, with holiday vouchers, and the work undertaken by that team, not just in capital developments, but to meet the needs of particularly vulnerable families and children in Northumberland, has been outstanding. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background to the 2021 academic year, it's another year of disruption, restrictions and remote learning amid challenging circumstances within the profession. I would say that the whole of the profession managed to maintain a really stable position despite all of the challenges. So for our children, they did above and beyond on a routine basis. In short, it was another extraordinary year in which education and skills in Northumberland have been hugely affected by the pandemic. It was, though, very different to previous years, and in many ways tougher, particularly for schools and skills professionals, as well as children, young people, residents and their families. However, what is absolutely crystal clear is that the importance of our work for children, young people and residents, whatever the circumstances, we continue to respond and support at every opportunity. I've taken the opportunity to just give you some of the images out of the digital report here. So that first page is relative to page 133 in the digital report. And actually what I asked, and you see in the digital report, are really the impact of the work that's gone on across the county. So whether that's results in schools, whether that's our number of exclusions that have changed year on year, whether or not it's the number of school improvement visits that have taken place across the year, you will see them in this digital report. So I've taken those through first and secondary, just given some highlights here. There's nothing on here that isn't in the digital report already. So you'll see that actually we're improving inclusion in Northumberland when we compare that year on year. Our 98% of our early years provided were rated good or outstanding up to the summer of 2021. So some really good stats. Comparably, we do really well, not just north of Tyne, but actually nationally we are in the upper decile for some of the statistic reviews that we consider. So you'll see there we've had over 400 school improvement visits, more than 1,000 attendees at early years development and training sessions. And actually this is in addition to schools managing their very best to maintain schools open and safe and keeping children learning on a daily basis. This is all additional and wrapped around that. You will see on the next slide there, I'm talking particularly about where the top-ranked authority in 2020-21 for offering parents reception places. And indeed, this week, we've just had the secondary offers out this week. So again, another strong performance. But clearly that's a little taster for this time next year when I'm talking about our performance next year. And then, of course, also, again, relative to previous reports that we've talked about. So just referencing on there the work undertaken with British Vault. So you'll see in those 3 circles the 3-stage process that's been undertaken with the Section 106 agreement and that strategic partnership working, particularly to meet the needs of residents in the locality where the site will be based, but also developing the education model and the engagement model moving forward. And a lot of the work in this area is underpinning new directions, and you'll see that there. So we have a number around Blythe Energy Central Learning Hub, Kielder Observatory, and of course all of this was detailed within the skills strategy that's been to previous meets. So you will expect me, and as I would always want to present, the areas for improvement, and that looks a long list, but this is us becoming much more refined around what we want to do, where we want to go, and the things that we want to achieve. So in particular, and we've talked an awful lot about SEN today, particularly around Atkinson House and the potential relocation decision that's moving to Cabinet. So we want to accelerate the work. We're undertaking a review, a Better Futures review within our statutory SEN processes. And I'll just reference back to Councillor Ball earlier. Actually, this is about ensuring that we make sure the experience of our children and parents and carers is uppermost in terms of us designing any of our systems. And that's the whole core of that Better Futures review going on in there. I think coming to you probably across the summer will be an inclusion strategy that Sue is currently developing at this moment in time. So you'll see that. And again, relates to an awful lot of what we've talked about, ensuring that we meet needs much closer to home, but that in fact we're able to be dynamic and have facilities, education and support with supporting infrastructures to meet a greater range of needs. We want to strengthen and work in partnership alongside our secondary colleagues, particularly around performance and our Key Stage 4 Progress 8 measures. That's what we call them now. Who knows what we're going to call them in the future, because we don't have an established baseline. So we will be beginning to look at that. It won't be driven by Northumberland, but Northumberland will have a voice within the national new baseline approach. We want to have a really strong preparation for adulthood for all of our children and young people. This is a strand within the SEN Code of Practice, and you will remember for us it was a particular aspect that we're developing as a result of the SEN Written Statement of Action. So that preparation for adulthood you will see moving through in an awful lot of work, and I would expect again a report coming back to you about that. I've referenced in the report that the world has changed, and the way in which we learn, the way in which we talk, meet in general. So lots of our meets continue to be online. For us in Northumberland, that's a really positive approach. So it not only contributes to our climate change action plan, but it's more efficient and more effective for us. I can have a greater engagement with some of our smaller rural schools as a result of holding digital meetings than I can perhaps have everyone here in a meeting. And it's brilliant to be face to face, but actually the convenience and the wider spun benefits of continuing that digital approach can be seen in many aspects. And so that for us is a key aspect to take forward. We'll develop more partnership models, so you'll hear much more. There'll be a new British Vault, a new generation of that coming forward, and I'm sure that you'll hear Neil come back with a number of those. Boosting apprenticeship starts in priority sectors is a really key aspect. So I said earlier that businesses need to be able to recover as a result of COVID and to be able to begin to rebuild and regain their workforce and invest in apprenticeship development. So for us, that is really key, to work with businesses. And I think at the last meeting, Councillor Dale and I in particular were talking about careers and developments and routeways. This all links into our careers approach, our post-16 apprenticeship, and indeed our school liaison, and ensuring that we've got the right information provided for everyone to make the most appropriate choices. And last on my list, but absolutely not least, is to implement an SEN place planning and capacity development at every key stage, which informs our thinking and investment. And I think you've already heard from me around the SEN transport review this morning to say that, perhaps if we'd had an SEN place planning model in place, we would have got the budget closer to where it needed to be. And you will notice that the stats in terms of our school place planning are outstanding. So it would make sense to me to ask our team who undertake the place planning to now undertake that role for SEN. So at this moment in time, David Street, who's here currently, is doing all of the place planning short term. And in September, Sue's team will take over the place planning for SEN. So David's doing the transition work from a colleague who was no longer in the service. And between the two of them, working hard to make sure that all of our children are placed in the most appropriate provision to meet their needs currently and in the future. So again, much more to talk about that in the future going forward. And last but not least, and I'm delighted I've got this far without a coughing fit, the future, really, just the summary of our report. It has been a really challenging year with many changes. I don't think we've begun to quantify the levelling up, to coin a phrase that's very much in statute with the white paper these days. And that levelling up really needs to bring us back to a baseline from 2019, because we're measuring everything against 2019 and the world has very much changed. So much happening, but there's much to agree and lots to do to agree that future baseline, the new baseline for future planning. It would be fair to say that the impact of the work undertaken by the whole system, it's documented, I'm hoping, in this report. We've given you a headline performance that continues to improve for our children in Northumberland. Attendance is improving and exclusions are reducing for the academic year 2020-21. Our performance against peer authorities in aspects such as admissions and first choice school places remains in the upper decile, and in some aspects we are #1 for that in the country. Our approach to meet children's needs much closer to home, as we see the rising demand for inclusive education services, is an accelerant for our immediate actions and work. And again, I think it ties in with a number of our reports much earlier today. But as an example, I think our work is to ensure that at every level we're joined up with relevant services and partners to ensure we're targeting the right and best outcomes as a core of our strategy and achieve best value at pace. So finally, and in conclusion, I think there is much to celebrate for this sector across Northumberland. The sterling work and professional standards demonstrated in all of our schools, early years settings, our wider services across Northumberland, and all of our partners out there in industry and education more broadly, as well as the central team, have shown and showcased resilience beyond doubt, hard work and commitment, particularly focused on our children, young people and our residents' future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very comprehensive, Audrey. And just before I open this up to questions, I think it's worthwhile putting on record that what this says on item 6 is to present the work of the Central Education and Skills team and the impact of the work. And this report also screams the partnerships that we have with our schools. And all the people who make those schools happen. It's not just teachers, it's the whole team which sits around that. And I think given the fact that we've had a pretty torturous 2 years with COVID, and that schools were already facing challenges, and we were already facing grade deficits irrespective of what happened at COVID, I think that we have put on record here before our appreciation to the central team here, but also to our wider teaching workforce and support staff. And I think that very much still stands, because what this shows is, despite all the challenges, people have stepped up to the plate and made the system work. And had it not been, particularly for the core central team here, I think things could have been a lot worse. So I think it's really important that we put that on record. So, comprehensive report. So I'm looking for some hands, and I've got Councillor Dale waving at me like mad over in the corner.
Over here in the corner.
And I've also got Councillor Ball. So Councillor Dale first.
Thank you very much, Audrey, for a very comprehensive report. And can I just say thank you, because actually, as you said, the last 2 years have been very difficult. And I think that's been difficult for everybody. And I think one or two things I'd like to say which came from the report, but one of the things that came out to me was actually resilience, and how we actually looking forward that we build this massive resilience within the council, but we need to take that resilience to children. Because I think looking from, and that's working with the Cumbria Northumbrian Mental Health Care Trust, that there has been a tremendous, well not tremendous, but there has been more and more people looking for help because of the lack of resilience that COVID's probably knocked from them. So it's just, that's important for all ages, going through even to older people who are looking for skills outside. I think also that looking forward to the children and to the benefit of everybody is with the levelling up, is actually lifting their aspirations. And I know there was a lot of work done. Newcastle University did some work with Robin Castle and myself about aspirations. And I think I can remember them saying, when if you lived in Ponteland and if you lived in Blyth, you'd probably all want to become footballers. And that changed, though, when you got to the age of 9, 10, whereby people's aspirations changed to becoming, maybe in Ponteland, more with what the people in their environment did or their village did, as to other places who weren't so, who were more deprived. So there's a lot of information there, and I think that's one of the things I've found within working schools, within the employability, etc., which I was talking to Audrey about last time, was actually lifting the aspirations of those children from being something that was a low aspiration to lifting it to high. And we've done that within working with our schools. I've been doing it within the whole of the partnership that I am involved in. And I think that's something which I can talk to Audrey about and discuss where we can help with that. The other thing was, just very quickly, there were one or two things that people did contact me about, that actually our first schools, primary schools, have been outstanding for a long time. It's nothing new. Pre-2017, they weren't dire. They were actually very good. We were still in the top performing county for first school. And I think that, this is with all the backing of the education department all the way through, that they've actually, through all that time, with all that's been thrown at them, have been resilient in keeping to that high standard. The one or two issues about, I'm just saying, which I note out of the report, is this, for instance, is this social value that we're talking about deprivation? And it just says in the report about scheme generated in page 124 about school reorganisation and how an investment in an area, this was actually in Ponteland, has generated over £40.6 million worth of social value in the local area and has an enormous economic effect for the county of Northumberland. That to me is something that when we're looking at levelling up shows the value, but that's in an area which isn't deprived. So we need to be looking at those deprived areas, especially with education, etc., to ensure that we have that type of investment. It's not always financial investment, let me say. In some ways, it's more people, more help, learning more skills. And as Audrey said, you know, lifting the aspirations, and I'm saying giving them resilience and lifting their aspirations. So I'm quite, I just thank you for the report. It is good. You've done a tremendous amount. I think I could probably go through every little piece in detail, but I'm not going to. But I'm quite happy to come and discuss with you because one of my things I've always said, and everybody knows, I think every child should have the same opportunity in life from when they're born all the way through. And we actually can help that. And I hope with levelling up coming in, that we'll be able to help those areas where there is deprivation and starting with the schools, which I think is a basic real performance that every child gets that offer. So anyway, thank you for that, but thank you to all the staff because COVID-19, I was talking to one yesterday ahead who said, I'm beginning to feel slightly normal within my working environment. And it's been very difficult for them. And I have to say a big thank you to everybody. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Don't know if any officer wants to come in on that. I think it's a bit of a gold star for you there.
Yeah.
Just to say thank you. It is team effort and we have worked very, very well. Some of the things that you've talked about, particularly around resilience, Councillor Dale, I hope that you've taken some assurance from our earlier discussions around co-location of services to understand that we recognise that in everybody, actually, everybody needs some resilience support somewhere. And it's about making sure that we've got the right support for the right people to enable to do more of their job and be really good. It's tough when you're outstanding. As a school to have that badge, that's a really tough position to be in. It's lovely for a short window of time. And then you immediately start to begin to think, so when is somebody going to check me again? What's that next one? And that is really, really tough. So that's tough in usual times and tough with what we've gone through. It's even harder. We are looking and working with public health to see how we can make, I think it's called Make Every Connect or Contact Count, doing some work. And I'm hoping that we're going to have a really specific programme that will be for the workforce and education skills, but also for children. So we'll come back with that one.
Can I to that to say thank you. Just I think the importance is actually getting younger children, getting them resilient, and actually, you know, even if they go to school and learn to tie their laces, and they feel I've actually done something really good and put it in their little box, and they learn to think actually their achievements, even if starting at the very beginning, but actually give them a sort of self-respect about every bit of achievement they do in life and building the resilience in. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ball.
Thanks, Chair. So this one, absolutely fantastic report, by the way, and a lot of time, effort has went into it, and big well done to everybody involved. But this is a little bit of a personal gripe. Right, so on page 134, more than 100 newly qualified teachers, more than 1,000, so more than 101, is it 100, is it million? Both of them are more than 100. So it's just, if we're going to put detail in, can we have specific rather than just something to fill a bit of the page? And again, being in care has a positive impact on education achievement. Where's that statement come from? Who's actually said it? Is it, what's it in comparison with? Because just a statement like that, it's just, it's just a page filler. And again, 127 adult learners undertaking health and care qualification, 97 progressed into employment. What's that? Are they working 1 hour a week? Are they in a full-time job? Is it relating to what they did? Just a little bit more detail, because as I say, the report's great, it's crystal clear and anybody can read it, but also putting things like that in, it almost becomes a little bit disposable, because it's not, as I say, is it 101, is it a million? So if we've got them detail, I would rather see a little bit more detail in there, but that's it. But apart from that, it's great. Thank you.
Can I just come back, Chair? So, yeah, comments noted, and I think that's probably a marketing ploy. So the girl who produces our digital will tell me that 100 looks better than 101. I'm sure that's what that will be. In terms of those detail in the statements, what you will find is the final digital version of this will be hyperlinked to all of our previous reports. So, for example, the 97 out of 126 doing health and social care was a statistic taken out of the annual adult learning report that I presented at the last meeting. So that will be hyperlinked in the final report so that you'll be able to go in and see all the detail.
Great, thank you. And actually, one other thing. Obviously, we hear about all the schools that are doing great and outstanding, but we still have a number of children in Northumberland that are really struggling with literacy and numeracy, and obviously it's that lifelong learning. So just a little bit of linked into that would be nice to see as well. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, actually on that point, before I come to Mr Hodgson, it does reference in the report about the number of primary schools which we have, which are good or outstanding, and then it references 67% of our secondary schools. And I think I am right in saying that the majority of our secondary schools are actually academised. And technically, we have no power over them. It's the power of a regional schools commissioner. So one of the things which I've just been sitting here thinking to myself is, you know what? I don't know that we've ever had the regional schools commissioner summoned to this meeting to have a chat with us about our secondary schools. So there's a look of horror on faces here, but you know, that's good, isn't it? That's what scrutiny's for. So I would like to table to get our regional schools commissioner along, have a chat with us about secondary schools, because some of these secondary schools which are not good or outstanding were converter schools. That is, they had failed whilst they were sitting as a local authority. They were mandated through to academise in order to improve, and for some of them there has been improvement, for some there's been some stall. And we work in partnership, including with the Regional Schools Commissioner. So I think that would be good if we could actually bring the Schools Commissioner along to talk about how we can work in partnership. So before I come to Mr Hodgson, I just wanted to dive in with that one. Audrey, you wanted to come in there.
It might be helpful to try and coincide that with the new education white paper when that comes out, and then we could manage the white paper for the committee as well as the Regional School Commission discussions.
Perfect. And if she's watching, I'm sure she'll be putting this in her diary. So brilliant. Mr Hodgson, over to you.
Not funny enough, Wayne, it was one of the points about the secondary education. I mean, it is an excellent report. Thanks. And so many positives as you go through it, with obviously, for example, primary education, so on there. But it does stand out that dip at secondary, there's no doubt about it. And it was an issue before the pandemic, at the Key Stage 4 data and so on. And what I was thinking was that, I know you put on the thing, I think it was the third one down, about your focus, your strong focus on Key Stage 4. When you think about it, the children or the students that are going to go into Key Stage 4 have had 2 years of very disjointed education. The challenge for Key Stage 4 for the next couple of years is going to be greater than ever. Are there additional resources going in, or is it going to be left to the schools themselves to try and prioritise within that? Or is there a coherent plan across the secondary phase? Thanks.
Yeah, happy to come back. So yes, we are working with the schools, but as Chair has pointed out, the greater majority of our secondary schools are academies.
Yeah.
Some of them we do provide school improvement support to, but our school improvement teams are working alongside. At this moment, there are no additional funds, so schools are still continuing to work within the their frameworks that they have. But there is a big focus. We don't yet know what that rebaseline will be because, you know, I'm making that statement and judgment based on what we knew Key Stage 4 measures and progress measures were in 2019.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right to point out that we're equally as concerned now as we were in 2019 prior to the pandemic. What I have been doing is working particularly with David and with Dave Cookson. David might want to come in. But what we are confident about, because we look at our 67% as a figure, so we know that 67% are good and outstanding. We haven't yet got that higher. We do have a level of confidence that we will see that move given the work and performance of schools. So once we've got Ofsted and we understand they're about to pick up pace with inspections, we expect a number of our schools to change their status based on performance. So I would hope by the end of the summer term to be able to start and talk to you about a different statistic.
Great.
And that's about endurance and resilience. So back to Councillor Dale's, the resilience throughout pandemic.
Yes.
You know, they've been supporting pupils and doing their best to get them to where they need to be across the last 2 years and continuing to improve.
David Street wants to come in. He's the Deputy Director of Ed, and then I'm going to bring in Paul Rickard.
Just to add to Audrey's comments, really, certainly the prediction from us, which is based in pretty strong evidence, is that the Ofsted outcomes in particular for the secondary sector will show improvement in the next 12 to 18 months. And again, ideally by the summer, if Ofsted can actually get their visits completed and so on. So we certainly look forward to that and to reporting on that further. Another element, I think, which actually Audrey personally has done a lot of support with, is to support the NASH group, so the Northumberland Secondary Heads group, which possibly had been getting a little bit not quite as connected as it once was. But actually one of the positive things of COVID is the support networks that the central teams and the schools themselves have needed to work together to overcome the challenges of COVID has actually brought that group closer together, and whether they're academies or maintained schools or what have you. And there is a bit more of a level playing field of support and interaction between themselves. So, for example, the work done on making the assessed grades for GCSE and A-levels in the last couple of years, the work between that group to have a Northumberland collective approach, one that's actually been exceptionally robust, and where there has been challenges, been able to so as an example, they're working together much stronger. The Ofsted outcomes will improve in the next 12 to 18 months, and I think it is a brighter picture from a secondary perspective.
Great, thank you for that, David. Paul Rickard.
I think without labouring the point, if you look across at the Ofsted report, Section 8 that have been taking place, there is a positive picture for Northumberland in secondary. I think this is one of our frustrations, speaking as a diocese, where Ofsted are so far behind, and being careful what you wish for in terms of we would welcome some inspections on some of our schools who are due, particularly academies. But I think, again, to mention what David said there about heads working together, I don't think in my time as director I've seen that strength of network that exists now between secondary schools, church, non-church, maintaining academy. I think actually there's been an awful lot of work going into bringing the collective of, as you say so regularly in Northumberland, these are all our children, whether it's an academy or a maintained school, it needs to be everyone with the same focus. So I think from our perspective, we welcome the report, we think it's a great report, and we do think that that kind of latent effect following through into secondary will become apparent in the eyes of Ofsted. I would only ever say, though, I think you want great schools. I'm not particularly worried if they're outstanding or good. They just have to be great.
Good. Regional Schools Commissioner definitely going to come to our next meeting then, isn't she? She'll be loving this. Right, I do notice that a number of people are sitting with their red lights on their mics. Just if you could switch them off, because Suzanne, just press your button. It does actually, we pick up a lot of heavy breathing on the live feed. So, any other comments, observations from this? No, Suzanne, no, you can put your mic on. There you go.
Oh, keep me right, please, honestly. Thanks, Audrey, for that. There's a great amount of positives in there. I love the apprenticeships and focus on skills training. I think that's fabulous, especially considering the unemployment levels, you know, post 18 to 24 in Northumberland. Mine's a kind of very specific point, so excuse me if it's not the place to mention it. I was reading about the school organisation and resources, and obviously we've got this wonderful new school in Hexham. The middle school and the Queen Elizabeth site have been amalgamated, so we've got the blend of the refurbishment and the new school that I heard about earlier. One is more favoured than the other, but this is brilliant. So we've got the 3G pitches, we've got the biggest indoor sports hall in Northumberland, all going out to the community. It's all fabulous. However, it was written, this paragraph, as though on page 125, as though the school is completed. It's very much not. And that did concern me, because the school have a sort of a huge checklist going forward with problems with the site, as it's still under construction, from drainage to minarets, letting in birds. But the big one is the drainage, and I'm just concerned that I just would like an assurance that that's going to be addressed before the signing off period in April, I believe it is. So the flooding is coming down from the Halgate burn. It's washing over these amazing facilities that we've just spent shed loads of money on, as far as I can see. And it's washing out the paths to the facilities, as well as washing onto residential houses in the area. It's quite a big concern because it's after every surge. And in fact, the first one that we noticed was on New Year's Eve. Me and my husband noticed that it was filling up, and rivers were forming that were washing away these facilities. And so it's not just, we've not just noticed it at storm times, it's been after just increased rainfall. And I'm just worried that this, I would just like some kind of assurance that this is all going to be the school's going to be helped to see this through.
Okay, we'll pick that up with our world-class expert, Sue Aviston. There we go.
I can feel a pay rise coming on. Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, you're right. I was there on Friday with my wellies on. So I can speak with a voice of experience. Actually spent quite the afternoon there actually investigating the issues that have been raised by local residents. With our flood alleviation team here at NCC as well. So you're right, there has been experiencing flooding actually on site. We've done everything that we can on site. It's actually things that are happening above the school site. It's fallen trees into the, it's the other landowner. It's fallen trees into the burn. It's blocking up. It's now created a whole new lake the other side of the new tennis courts that we've built. You're absolutely right that then he's flooding over into the public right away and actually flooding
I thought
down.
those trees were a kind of a plunk drainage system at one point, the new site. I wasn't sure if that was okay.
Yeah, so as a local authority more widely, not just obviously within the schools team, but the local authority more widely with our flood alleviation team are in discussions with the landowner. They have removed what they can, but they now need to get in some big machinery to remove what is left, and because of the ground conditions, they haven't been able to do so. But they will plan that as soon as the weather becomes a little bit drier. We're also looking at other things we can do on site, but obviously the drainage we've installed, as you rightly said, under the new 3G pitch, under the sand-based hockey pitch, means that the school site is better than it's ever been, and it's a runoff off other people's land that is destroying perhaps some of the things that we have introduced. But yes, it will get resolved. It is something that we're working on with support of the school. The school have gone over and above what they needed to do. There is a culvert that's associated with all these works are actually off-site, but the school themselves continue to get the culvert cleared out so that this doesn't happen. But when it does happen on the Saturdays and Sundays and people are not around, that's when we've experienced the flooding. Has always been over a weekend. And again, our contractor on site, not part of his work, but he's also been doing the same, cleaning the culvert, which isn't our responsibility.
Yeah.
So we are fully aware of the
And my
issues
husband
that,
with a stick.
Oh,
But I'm just wondering if you can get little monitors. I've seen them on some of the culverts further down in Hexham where the buzzer goes off as they fill.
Yeah, we've got one by my house actually as well, actually, Hepscott, yeah.
I just think that would be probably something that's quite useful. Alerts them.
Okay, well, we'll pick that up. And you're right, the school isn't finished yet. But you'll probably notice now that the whole of the old building has come down while I was there on Friday. The last part of it came down. So we're actually on track, on programme, to get the new bus drop-off and the rugby pitch in place for the spring. So hopefully as soon as that's complete, then we'll have an official opening of the school. But what we're trying to highlight here in the report, that it is substantially complete and phase 1 of the works is done. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. That just proves we are nothing if not detailed in this committee, talking about you with your stick, moving leaves and whatever else. So, thank you very much for that. I can't see any other hands indicating to speak. So, Audrey, thank you very much, and to your team and to all of our partners for that report. Very, very welcome. So, we're now moving on the agenda to item number 7, which is the Safeguarding Activity Trends and Benchmarking Report. And Brian Smeaton, you're going to be taking us through that. So, over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I should probably introduce myself because I haven't been to this meeting for a few years now. So I'm Brian Smeaton. I'm a manager within the Children's Services Performance and System Support team. So I'm here today to present the Safeguarding Activity Trends Report, which does include elements of benchmarking, which just means comparing Northumberland's figures to the most recent regional and national figures. The report itself is split into 3 sections, which the first section looking at children and families who've been through the child protection process. So the numbers of children that have been referred to us by partner organisations such as health, schools, the police. We label these as contacts within the world of social work. The proportion of these contacts that then get converted to social work referrals, and then the number of children and families that are assessed by a social worker. Where there's risk of significant harm to a child, this Section 47 inquiries is undertaken. The report looks at the proportion of those Section 47 inquiries that convert to initial child protection conferences, and then the number of children who end up with a child protection plan. The second part of the report looks at our children in care, in terms of the numbers of children in care we've had since the start of 2020. It also looks at some of the permanence outcomes for those children, and it also looks at the suite of indicators that get reported by the Department for Education with regards to the data that's submitted by each local authority. The final part of the report looks at the social work workforce, and again there's a suite of indicators that are included in there which come from, again, another annual data return which is submitted to the Department for Education. So in terms of the highlights of the report, charts 1 and 2 show the average number of contacts that are received per day within our front door, and chart 2 tries to highlight in yellow the average number of contacts that we receive from schools. You'll see that from the chart that there's various peaks and troughs since the start of 2020, but you'll also notice that where the overall numbers of contacts reduce, this is mostly in line with reduction in contacts, the average contacts from schools, which coincides with periods of lockdowns or where there's been school holidays. So across the calendar year 2021, we had almost 9,500 contacts that were triaged by our social work services within the front door, and 28% of those converted to a social work referral. And that's broadly in line with the 2020 picture, with 25%, and also broadly in line with the most recent national figure, also 25%. So that 28% converts to 2,692 referrals across the calendar year 2021. And when you equate that to the under 18 population, come out with a rate of 458 referrals per 10,000. That sits between the national figure of 438 and the regional figure of 507. Chart 3 shows the number and proportion of repeat referrals or re-referrals per quarter. And across the whole of 2021, Northumberland's re-referral rate was 16%, which is a reduction from the previous year of 21%, and is also below the national and regional figures, which is 21%. And we really see this as a positive reflection on children and family receiving the right service at the right time, and that when cases closed, families can sustain the successes that led to the case being closed without ongoing social work support. Paragraphs 10 and 11, these touch on those children that are at risk of significant harm. And where a Section 47 inquiry has been undertaken. So across the calendar year 2021, there was 990 children who were where there was a Section 47 inquiry, and that equates to a rate of 168 per 10,000 children, and that figure's in line with the national average. 60% of our Section 47s led to an initial child protection conference, which is higher than the national figure of 37% and the regional figure of 43%. And we've looked at the decision making around Section 47s within regular audits, and that's been scrutinised, and we do feel assured that the thresholds with regards to Section 47s are being applied appropriately and that we're not intervening with families unnecessarily. Moving on to children in care. Chart 7 shows the total number of children in care since the start of 2020. And since May 2020, when the figure was at its highest, 456, the number of children in care has slowly decreased to 400 at the end of 2021. That means that our rate of children in care per 10,000 is now in line with the national figure and well below the North East figure. Paragraphs 24 and 25 talk about permanence options for our children in care. And across 2021, of those children who left care, 22% were adopted, 23% were made subject to special guardianship orders, and 29% returned home. And all three of those figures are better than the national picture. Paragraphs 26 to 29 focus on some of those outcome indicators that are generated from the annual data returns relating to children in care. You'll see that in the reporting year 2021, the majority of those figures were better than the national average, although two do stand out as not being better, and that is the proportion of children in care who had their immunisations up to date across the reporting year. So that was 75% in 2021 compared to the national figure of 86%. And the proportion of our children in care who had their teeth checked across the year. So that was 29% in the reporting year 2021 compared to the national figure of 40%. Having checked with our colleagues in health, those figures had reduced due to issues linked to the pandemic. The last part of the report looks at the social work workforce, and paragraph 30 looks at the figures that are generated from the social work workforce return that we submit to the Department for Education. There's two things to note with this return. It doesn't just include frontline social workers, it also includes team managers and senior managers, so the likes of Graham will be included within the data set. The other thing to note is that the national and regional figures are from the previous year, 2020. So there's four main indicators that are looked at within this report, and a lower figure is generally better. First one looks at the staff turnover rate. So that was 17% within 2020, with the reporting year 2021, compared to 15% in 2020. The proportion of agency social workers that were used in 2021, that increased to 10% from 9% the previous year. And that's better than the national picture, but in line with the North East picture. Northumberland's vacancy rate also increased in 2021 to 12% from 10% the previous year, which is better than the national picture, but worse than the regional picture. And our sickness absence rate also increased in 2021 to 4% from 3% the previous year, which is now above the regional and national averages. So although those figures increased, especially the staff turnover rate, the vacancy rate and the agency social worker rate, we think it does reflect the challenges that all local authorities are facing with their recruitment and retention of the social work workforce. So that's a whirlwind tour of the highlights of the report. I'll gladly attempt to answer any questions.
Great. Brian, that's really detailed. And for those of you who've not seen these reports before, the level of detail is intense there. Any comments or observations from anyone? Councillor Dale.
Sorry, I'm sitting at the end. I'm going to grab you because you won't see me otherwise. Thank you very much. I didn't catch your surname, please.
Smeaton.
Meekins. Sorry, thank you for that. Didn't hear. Thank you. It's very explicit, but it also shows you the degree of issues and concerns in the area. Just one or two things. On page 149, and this is just an observation, 18, converting this to a rate gives a figure of 68 children in care per 10,000, line with the national rate of 67. So it's in line more or less. Below the regional rate of 108. Now, the regional rate will be very high because we're one of the highest deprived areas in Europe, actually. So that, I don't think that is particularly helpful in a way, because you've got to take, if you took that and took it down to Shropshire or somewhere like that, it looked very different. So it's just the regional things. So I'm not sure if that's a good help. Just to say that, and I'm not going to ask this to be discussed because I don't think it's helpful to discuss it and helpful, but it would be interesting to know where the care that was required, which areas it comes from, because it could be part of a levelling up discussion. And I don't think that this is particularly something I want to do here, unless you want to discuss it. But I think it's something we should all understand, because it isn't just in areas of deprivation, it's in other areas as well. It comes across the board. But I think that would be helpful to find out the background more in areas, but maybe not in public. I'm quite happy about that one too. The other thing is just about foster carers. I do know, and this is going back because I haven't been on this committee for a while, but foster carers weren't given the same reimbursement as outside in other council areas. So I have some people in my ward who are foster carers. They actually have children from outside because they actually get reimbursed a higher amount of money. So my view is it would be lovely if every child who had to go and care to a foster care stayed in their own, even in their own county or whatever, rather than going outside. That's just something we could discuss. And I'm not sure if Audrey or whoever looks at those figures and things, but it would just be something that it's always been up before, it's always been highlighted before, and I'm not sure if that's something that is highlighted now. So those are just the three things I wanted to raise, but thank you. I'm saying it's a good report, it's very detailed, but there's an awful lot more behind this. Thank you very much.
What I'd like to do, Councillor Dale, is bring in Graham Writer, who's Service Director, Children's Services, to come in on some of those quite detailed questions that you asked there.
Yeah, and certainly there are more detailed reports, Councillor, that are considered in other areas of the practice. So, for example, for children who become looked after, we do look at the postcodes from where they came in, and that is scrutinised at our corporate parenting group meeting. In relation to the location of placements, we always aim to place children locally and ideally within foster care within there. And our rate of placements of children within 20 miles of their home address is better than national and local comparators. So we have got more detailed drill down information. This, to be fair, is the higher level information, as Brian said, around those key areas of child protection, children looked after, and our workforce. But we do we scrutinise this information, the much more granular information, on at least a monthly basis at our senior management level, and each of our service areas have even more granular detail looking at that performance information, so we can then drill down into and look at where we need to look at the quality of practice as well. So the starting point for a lot of this performance information, so for example, if we see dips or changes in trends, we will undertake specific audit work or quality assurance work to both understand that, and if we do need to make changes on how we're doing, then we do that in response to where the data might look for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. So in order, I have Councillor Ball, Councillor Watson, and then Councillor Dunbar. So Councillor Ball.
Thanks, Chair. So it's just with regards to some stuff on page 151. So it's with relation to the immunisation and teeth checks. I'm just wondering, when can we expect to be back on track with them? Do we have any timeline for that? And my second question relates to point 28 and the care leavers. We've seen in Wales recently that they're introducing a £1,600 a month basic income for care leavers at the age of 18 for 2 years in a trial. I'm just wondering if there's been any discussions, or are we even watching what's happening with that trial? And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Graham, do you want to pick those up?
Yes.
Brian, sorry, you're being usurped here. I'll get you on the next one.
Sorry, Brian. Yes, we are watching, we're aware of and watching and making links about the Wales trial. I think there are other concerns about how that might work, but absolutely very interested in watching what happens there. I've forgotten the first part of your question, Councillor, apologies.
And when do we expect to be back on track with the immunisation and teeth checks? Because obviously that does have a long-term impact for the young people.
Yeah, we picked that up through our multi-agency looked after panel, which includes our health staff, and they have aimed and tried to get our children and young people prioritised through that. And what we'll do is we'll monitor the progress and effectiveness of that through our performance reports to corporate parenting.
Thank you for that. Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Chair. It's always great, and I think, like people have mentioned, to see the improvements on some of these reports, but for me, I'm always interested in the remaining numbers. So chart 4 on page 146, where it talks about the people seen within the 45 days target, which I guess is a standard that's set by somebody somewhere. I just wondered how we can improve further on that, and because the figures are on there, I noticed that at one point it was 24% back in 2020. So what are the numbers of people waiting over 45 days? And do we then evaluate the effects of people waiting longer time? So do these lead to higher numbers of children who are subject to an ICPC because they're not getting the intervention early enough? And my second question is with regards to the workforce, because it's a passion of mine, working in health and social care, that I know the workforce is under extreme pressures. We have a retiring workforce, and we also have pressures on students being able to meet their placement hours. So I'm just wondering, it is a little bit disappointing to see regionally the authority is lower at 12% rather than 8%. For the vacancy rate. So I'm just wondering what the authority are doing to increase recruitment and retention, and do we still carry out exit interviews? Thank you.
So I'm guessing the order that these are going to be answered will be Brian, and then Audrey, I think you might want to come in on the skills and the training. Yep, so there we go.
Thanks, Chair. Just in terms of the assessment, the 45-day timescale is set nationally. And what we do is make sure we have management oversight of the progress of all the assessments from the starting point at varying points through that to make sure that we are responding in a timely way. And for those that go over, they won't have been waiting for the assessment. There might be issues within that assessment that requires it to take longer, either to complete the assessment and to complete some work. And I will make the point that we don't wait for service provision until the end of an assessment. If a service is required earlier during the period of the assessment, that is offered, and we've picked that up through our audit and oversight work of the assessment. So not just about the timescales of the assessment itself, ensuring that services that are needed more promptly than that are provided with that going through that assessment. And one of the ways in which we know that, we look at a number of our assessments that end up at a no further action for social work. And a lot of the time, or a high percentage of those, are because work has been completed during the period of the assessment, rather than waiting for the assessment to complete. There will be other reasons where we'll pass to other services as well, but that's part of that, and just to be clear about the assessment process. In terms of workforce, we have recently brought a paper here about our social work recruitment and retention strategy, and I'm happy to talk outside of here in a bit more detail about that. But we've got a whole range of actions and activities in place to try and improve that. But it absolutely is a national issue, this. So I'm chair of the regional recruitment and retention group across the North East. And even yesterday I was part of a conversation with colleagues in other parts of the country in terms of looking for us to work effectively together and look at creative solutions about how we can increase recruitment and retention and equally more efficiently and effectively manage the agency market. So there is a lot of detailed work being going on. A lot of that is detailed in previous reports here, but I'm again happy to pick up any detail or more conversations outside of that because it is a crucial issue for us.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more to that. So again, you'll have seen in some previous reports, one of the largest areas of recruitment and training in Northumberland Skills is health and social care. we've had extremely positive successes. In fact, it was the one that Councillor Ball referenced in the education report that I talked about. What we're able to do there is deliver that at all levels, and we know that we meet both entry requirements, so lower level, but also up to management, and we'll continue to increase that work. We also have an employability and skills team which takes an awful lot of our DWP, JCP referrals, and what we managed to be very successful with during COVID was particularly using a triage system to get people from employment that had ended very rapidly and moved them into care and did some retraining. So we've continued that work, and we won't dissipate in terms of that. There is also a North of Tyne programme, which is again delivered within a service in Northumberland County Council, and that's accelerating those individuals who are or have been carers themselves, and it's almost a fast track to take them through a qualification and get them into the workforce. I think that has about another year to run in terms of the project, but we will expect to absorb that within the Northumberland skills development moving forward. You may recall that we brought to this committee the Health Education England programme around our placements. So that's kind of our approach. But I would just mention two others. So the work with Northumberland College is one of our partners, and the developments that they're doing potentially around their new build will have a new health and social care immersed environment in which they will learn and be able to be more rapidly ready to move into the workforce. And I can't not mention the NHS and the brand new education facility that's planned at Cramlington. So we haven't covered all aspects of the county, but we are rapidly expanding. And so I'd expect in the next 2 to 3 years to have a much broader reach. We do have some plans under development at the moment. When we're ready, we'll bring those to this committee.
Councillor Dunbar.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, my question is about paragraph 27 about the children getting the teeth checked. I see what you're saying, you're going to bring it back to corporate parenting, but would it be possible for you to consider taking the children to private dental care? Because I know that a lot of the dentists at the moment aren't doing NHS examinations and they're only doing private only. I think I'm really concerned that the children don't get their teeth not attended to in a timely manner. Thank you.
I'll check where we're at with the colleagues that looked after children's health team and see if there are significant shortfalls. Then we do need to look at other ways of trying to meet that need then.
Thank you. Just one more point. Could I have a quick word with you before you leave? I've got a really urgent case that's come through that needs some attention. Thank you.
Any other comments? No? Great. Well, Brian, it's a really detailed report, and I think probably what people need to understand is the context is all of this stuff which sits here doesn't just come to us and we look at a bit of paper and go, isn't that really nice or isn't that terrible? This informs delivery across the council. It informs where we prioritise and where we allocate funding to. So it's a really, really important report, and the level of detail is phenomenal. So we'll see more of you. And I promise I will keep all of those people quiet and you can speak next time and wax lyrical about your report. We'll all be data driven. Marvellous. Right, so thank you very much for that, Brian. We're now moving on the agenda to the committee work programme. Chris Angus, you're going to take us through that.
Thanks, Chair. There's not much to say. We're sort of approaching the end of the council year, and hopefully I'll be able to bring a draft version of the 22-23 work programme to the next meeting. But the only thing to say about the work programme at this point is there will be a report that will go to Cabinet on the 12th of April, I think, so it'll come to this committee on the 7th of April and seek the committee's views on that. But that's the only thing I wanted to say at the moment.
Very much for that. Item of urgent business. I did want to bring Graham... Sorry, Councillor Dale.
I was just going to speak, so what's it? Just the report on the Berwick Partnership Organisation. It might be quite a good idea to have the regional director in at the same time, which you were referring to earlier on, because the Berwick Partnership's been quite high since 2008 in the the culture or the environment of this discussion on education?
We'll pick that up after the meeting and have a chat with the Regional Schools Commission, work out the best way of doing that, because I know that discussions are still going on around Berwick. So yeah, we'll pick up on that one. So thanks for bringing that up. Urgent business. Graham, I just wanted to bring you in on something that we have been briefed about before.
Yeah, it's just to bring to members' attention work we've been doing through the corporate parenting group, looking at how members can support the corporate parenting responsibilities for our children looked after and our care leavers, which we've developed what's called a skills audit, but we've kind of renamed it a corporate parenting members opportunities. And what we would going to do is take this to full council. What we've decided to do with your agreement is that what we would do is a very short couple of questions survey of all members, what they could offer, either through links that they have, businesses that they know, or other things that they could offer for our opportunities for our children looked after and our care leavers. And we were proposing that we would trial this with elected members from the corporate parenting group and this committee as well, to send that out and see what we can get from that to try and keep enhancing our parenting and support for our children looked after.
Thank you for that. On the agenda item, you'll see now that we need to move to the exclusion of press and public and end the public feed, because we are discussing an item, a confidential item. So I just want to show of hands that everyone's happy for us to move to part 2. That's fine. So if we could please end the live streaming. Thank you to everyone who's been watching this morning.